Coming up next on Two Cops, One Donut.
So I bypassed all of these senior agents as this young punk kid out of the academy because the old man had some juice and everyone was afraid of him. So what happened was I was like a marked man now by a lot of people. They were pissed off, and
Right.
I don't blame them. And so anyway, I had to keep my mouth shut. I had
Yeah.
to just learn as much as I could, work as hard as I could. And, it was actually an interesting challenge, but it all worked out. You got to earn your respect. I mean, I was under the microscope because everyone knew my father. Everyone knew he was a crazy lunatic. He was a legend in the DEA, but he was also really well liked because he took care of his guys. But what he told me was he said, you got to work close with the cops. They have big balls and they're going to help you learn the job. And that's exactly what I learned. And that's why I attribute my success, a lot of my success, to all these guys that taught me the job as a young agent.
All right, welcome back. Two Cops, One Donut. I am your host, Eric Levine. And today I have with me a former, I should say retired DEA. I always say DEA agent, but DEA. Derek Maltz. How you doing, buddy?
Eric, how you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Hey, anytime, man. I'm living the dream out here in Texas. How about you?
Yeah, I was born in Texas. You believe me?
No, not at all. Not with that accent.
Yeah, New York. I was born in New York, man.
Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, I was born in Michigan, believe it or not. So I'm with you. I'm more of a northern boy myself, used to the cold, but I had to get away from it.
I don't blame you. Yeah, I know it's brutal.
Are you still in New York?
No, I live in Northern Virginia. I was transferred down here for my last assignment in the government as the head of the DEA Special Operations Division in Northern Virginia.
Holy shit, that's a mouthful. That sounds like an important job too.
Well, depends who you ask. But actually, when I got there in 2005, there were 9 agencies working together: Intel, Community, Law Enforcement. And then when I left, about 10 years later, we built it up to 30 agencies, 3 countries, NYPD, trying to build up a synchronization center to work going after transnational criminals around the globe, working with our state and local partners, working with our foreign partners. So it's like an operational synchronization center. It was a lot of
Oh,
fun.
very cool. I've been diving into the real-time crime center stuff, making kind of going like that technology-based intel policing that
Yeah.
we've pushed towards. Learned a lot since 9/11 and the anti-terrorist task force stuff that's been going around and Homeland Security. And I think it's finally funneled its way down to policing, just the basic policing. And we're really, really capitalizing on the technology that's been developing since 2001. And I love it. Like, I've changed my whole career. I was going to be kind of what this podcast is about. I love the community policing aspect, reaching out to people, educating and stuff like that. But as far as my personal career goes, like, I've shifted modes now. I would like, the artificial intelligence, using the cameras, using, facial recognition and, the data compilation software that's out there. Oh man, all that stuff makes me have a lot of fun in my job. But
Yeah, I mean, well, I work for a software company that provides law enforcement data analytic software and wiretap software. So it is critical in a high-tech world. The bad guys are using every technology. The good guys have to, catch up. And it's sometimes difficult, but I'm very passionate about that as well.
yeah, we're always catching up. That's the problem. We're always behind the curve. That's what I try to make the public understand. Like, if you see the cops using it, the bad guys have probably been using it for the last 5 years.
Or
So
10.
or 10, yeah. So we're just trying to catch up. But all right. So if you are just tuning into this and you're like, all right, what's this? I see it's a DEA guy, but what are we going to talk about? So we're going to talk about DEA for one. We're going to dive into where Derek's from, his upbringing. I like showing that correlation of what kind of moves people into first responders or a life of service, whether it be a nurse, a teacher, cop, firefighter, prosecutor, judge. It's kind of very similar the way we all get into this career field. So we'll get into that, talk about his education a little bit, what it took to become DEA. You know, has he got his doctorate? Has he got a master's, associates, whatever? And then we'll jump right into DEA, the training involved, what the day to day is like, and then what Derek's up to today. Obviously, sounds like he's into some big shit out there in Virginia. So I'm very curious to hear about that too. So I appreciate you guys for listening and stay tuned for this. So, Derek, sir, uh, Derek Maltz. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. Born and raised in New York, correct?
Yes, I grew up on Long Island, and my father was a DEA agent for 30 years. I went to school at Syracuse University for accounting, had no like desire to be in the agency. And my father kind of pushed me into this field, actually filled out my application, really wanted me going in this direction. And so when I was 22 years old, most kids who don't really know what they want to do, I got a job as a DEA agent assigned to Long Island in my hometown.
At
So it's kind of
22.
interesting. Yeah.
Holy shit.
At
That,
that time, the average age in my class in Quantico was like 29 years old. So,
yeah.
and back in those days, Eric, you know, when you had a father who was a big boss, my father was running the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force in Manhattan, the oldest and largest drug task force in America, with NYPD, New York State Police, and DEA. And so he had a lot of juice, as they say, and he pulled some strings to get me on board. Honestly, like that wouldn't happen these days the way it is in all the agencies, right? It's much harder and much stricter. And so I'm thankful I got into the DEA. I had 28 years of fun. I never really had a day where I regretted going to work. It was a lot of fun, different excitement, you know, traveling around the world and working with some really great American patriots at the state and local level, the federal level, and also the international level. It's
Okay.
awesome.
I wanna get into a statement you just made there. You said traveling worldwide. We'll get in that in 1 second. Um, so the one part that I want to touch on is most cops, you know, we can become a cop at 21 in most places. I think for a while there was a small stint where you could be 18. And that may even still be true in some places. I don't know. I haven't heard of it, but you became a DEA agent at 22. Now, I've always known I was going to be a cop. So a little slightly different than you. It looks like your dad forced your hand, but you don't regret it. Um, I could have told you at 18 that I was ready to be a cop. But I can tell you right now that 40-year-old me with, you know, an 18-year career looking back would have told 18-year-old and 21-year-old and maybe even 25-year-old myself, like, you weren't ready. I was too young, too immature, I hadn't had enough life experience. So I know that for me, and that's coming from a city cop perspective. For you, DEA, now we're talking cream of the crop. Like, you know, that's one of the big names out there when people think of well-respected federal law enforcement. That DEA is one of them. So, what was your mind at 22 and now having your full career? Did you think you were ready at 22?
Well, let me back up. So when I was 9 years old, right, 1972, my father took me to the hospital to visit his partner, Tom Devine, who was sitting in the hospital bed, a rehabilitation center, because he had been shot in the back during a robbery, a drug ripoff in Manhattan. They were doing an undercover deal. They did the money flash. The bad guys tried to take the money and they shot Devine and they killed Frank Tamillo, one of the DEA agents. So I'm sitting there at 9 years old wondering what the hell's going on. This guy's sitting in a bed. He's paralyzed. He has a bullet in his back. So I think in my brain, there was probably something planted. And then, of course, at 13 years old, my father was a bit of a nut. Let's put it that way. He's a legend in DEA. They just dedicated the New York DEA gym in his honor. He's been gone about 10 years. But my father took me out on surveillance on a Saturday night to follow a black fugitive. And you know, I was a young kid in the back seat for hours waiting for some action. He takes me on the trip into Far Rockaway, which is not a very nice area in New York City along the beach. And he sends me and my friend into the building to follow this lady in the elevator, two white kids in an all black neighborhood. He sends us in the elevator to try to follow her and put her in an apartment at 13 years old. Absolutely insane. He used to put me in the back seat, put me under a blanket as he's meeting what he used to call stool pigeons, right? In the old days,
Yeah.
the informants were called stool pigeons. So I was actually probably being trained in my brain as young as 9, 12, 13 years old. And so when I became a college graduate, most kids don't know what the hell they want to do. This was the path for me, and my father knew it. And like I said, I'm very thankful. And I'll tell you, like my evolution in my career and what I'm doing now, so you'll better understand it. Now, one other thing I'll tell you is that my brother was a little bit of a train wreck, let's say, in high school. He was a troublemaker. He was known in the neighborhood, but he had a big heart for America, and he joined the U.S. Air Force. Unfortunately, in 2003, he died. He died in one of the first helicopter crashes during Operation Enduring Freedom. So obviously, public service was in our DNA from my father, right? He was dedicated. He took 2 weeks vacation in 30 years. Okay. Absolute lunatic. And obviously, his family suffered from his time away, not taking care of his family and not being there for his family. But um, deep down, he was a great public servant, and the troops loved him.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm also still in the Air Force, so hats off to your brother. Appreciate his service, and sorry that that happened. Unfortunately, that's did his was his helicopter hit?
No, what happened was he was part of the pararescue unit, right? The elite
Oh,
pararescue.
he was a PJ.
PJ at a 38th
Oh,
Rescue Squadron in Valdosta, Georgia. So he and 5 others were doing a rescue mission, and it was bad weather, and they crashed into the mountain. It was a refuel operation. It was apparently an accident.
yeah,
Although
okay.
my father, to the day he died, was in denial about that. Like he felt like Mike was on some secret operation and was shot down.
Yeah,
Who the hell knows? It doesn't really matter. The end
yeah,
result is 6 brave Americans died in a helicopter crash, and they came back in body bags. So, and they left their families behind. So at the end of the day, they were serving the country. That's what he was doing. He loved
yeah.
the country. So it is what it is.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, PJs are basically the Navy SEALs for the Air Force. Like that is our elite. They damn, they're pretty much aerial doctors for the most part, and they are always attached to SEAL teams, to Green Beret teams, to any of these special forces units that you're familiar with. There's always usually a PJ with them or two. So yeah, that is not an easy path in the military. So that that alone you should hang your hat on. That's a big deal. So, what was your brother's name?
Michael, Michael Maltz. By the way, on a side note, every year in March around the world, they have what they call the Maltz Challenge. And because the PJs were big time into CrossFit, basically this thing started in 2006 at my old operation. They set this up. It was a CrossFit challenge where the idea was to compete in this CrossFit challenge to honor not only my brother, but anyone that was serving the country that died in the line of duty. So, anyway, over the years, it's been spread around. Like right now, like I just got back from not too long ago, the Baltimore Ravens Under Armour Performance Center. They sponsor it. They hold events in Colorado, the Air Force Academy, Denver Broncos, Detroit Lions. They host this every year in March. And then also around the world, DEA offices sponsor this. And the cool thing about it is every year they nominate new folks that have died in the wars, and it's great for the families. And the best part, honestly, Eric, is that it's not a charity event. You don't pay anything. The idea is that you show up, you try to do the CrossFit challenge, which is almost impossible to do, like 50 pull-ups. Who the hell can do 50 pull-ups, right?
Not me.
And it's all timed. But the cool part is that people show up, and even if they do one pull-up, they're there showing their appreciation and their support to the military and what they've done to keep us all free here in America.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I like that. It's kind of like the Murph. The
Yeah,
Murph is a
same
yeah.
concept. Again, same concept, but again, DEA started this one. Military's been supporting it, and over the years, it's just evolved.
That's awesome. That's great. Keep your brother's memory going too. Love that. So for you, how old is your brother? Older than you or younger?
He was 2 years older, so he died at 42.
Okay. Um, really?
Yeah.
Holy cow! He was a PJ for a while then.
He got right in after high school because he was a problem in high school. He wasn't a good student, but he was a great guy. He meant well. He just needed better direction, and he found his passion with the Air Force and the PJs. He was an
Yeah.
instructor. I get messages every damn month from PJs around the world that recognize me on national news or Congress or whatever it is, talking about my brother. So every month I hear a new story. I was just some guy from I forgot Colorado, I think, just reached out to me. He was doing the Maltz challenge in Ohio, and he contacted me to tell me what an amazing legend my brother was in the Air Force. And so it's kind of cool because I get to meet people. As a matter of fact, there was one guy, I apologize, I just forgot his name. He was on the C-130 that was doing, I guess it was C-130, doing the refuel operation when Mike crashed. So he told me play by play what happened to my brother's helicopter as he saw the fireball explode as it hit the mountain. So,
Damn.
yeah, so I meet people like this all the time from the Air Force. Mike made an impression on many, Air Force career, brave warriors over the years, and so that's kind of cool. His legacy is moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, no, never had a desire for yourself for the military. Just jumped right into
No,
DEA.
like I said, I was going to school for accounting. My other brother's an accountant. I was following him, and basically the old man got involved, and that was it.
That's funny. My dad retired from the same police department that I'm with as well, uh,
Nice.
and it's the same thing that you're saying. I mean, I was probably groomed not necessarily for law enforcement, but for some sort of life of service and military first responder. Obviously, I couldn't quite make up my mind, so I went in the military first, and then I became a cop in the military, and then I got out and became a cop in the civilian world. But now I still do the reserves, so I like doing that stuff. I
Thanks for
didn't.
the service. Thanks for the
Hey,
service.
appreciate it, and not at the level of your brother. I couldn't handle that PJ stuff. That's you got to have a crossed wire or something in your brain to be able to do that
Exactly.
sort of thing. I'm a self aware man. I know where my limitations are at. So uh, I want the guys that think they can do all that stuff to go do it because I need them to do it for me. I'm not that guy. So
I hear you.
uh, let's jump. Let's switch roads here. I want to jump into the DEA. Okay, so um, you apply. Did you have to have a degree first off?
At
What
that
was the
time, yes.
process?
At that time, you did have to have a 4-year degree, which I did. Like I said, Syracuse University. So there were other requirements, and I got onto the DEA. I went to Quantico, Virginia, FBI Academy at the time. We didn't have our own DEA Academy. Went through,
Really?
yeah. Now we have our own academy, but at the time
Oh,
we went into the FBI Academy, and we had, of course, DEA instructors. And I went down to Quantico for 16 weeks and went through the academy.
okay. So what is it? 4 months? 16
Yeah.
weeks? Yeah, yeah. Something. I can't math. You're the accountant. I'll let you do the math. But okay. So you go there. Now is it like basic? Like when you get there, are they like on your ass when you first show up? Is it a dormitory type
Well,
environment?
that's a good question. So I don't want to bore you, but basically what happens is they used to do the training at Glencoe, Georgia. And around class 40, they switched it over to Quantico. And the first couple of classes, like 40, 41, and I believe 42, they were real tough on all the basic agent trainees. So much so that there was a lot of lawsuits because they went over the top, just beating them down and really, brutal, right?
Okay.
And so my class, I was kind of lucky. So BA 43 was the first class where they actually toned it down at Quantico, trying to really figure out the right mix of being hardos and training these young patriots to be agents, right? So I
Yeah.
got kind of lucky. Like we weren't working as much at night and the weekends, so we had a lot of free time on the weekends. And because I was at a college and I was an athlete in Division 1 lacrosse, I came on board and I was in good shape. And that was usually like the hardest part, the physical fitness stuff. So I was pretty much, ready to go with that. I had never shot before, so I had to learn about shooting, and I did very well for somebody never shooting. But and of course the academics, I was a young kid out of college. I had study skills, and I was ready for it. So it wasn't that difficult. I'm not trying to be cocky or anything like that, but I had an advantage because I was young, right? Some of these
Yeah.
guys that were, 34 years old, because at that time 36 was the maximum age. It was much more difficult for them. But we had a great class and everything worked out. But it was tough. I mean, 16 weeks being away and living in that condition, in FBI Quantico, right? In the dorms and everything. But overall, it was a great experience. Met a lot of good people.
Yeah. Now, while you're going through that, is it so training's kind of changed? I think people have figured out like that block training, that is a old school way. That they've kind of gotten away from. The military still gets caught up in that block training style a little bit. But like for my academy, uh, in Texas here, the way that they did it was I really liked it. So you know, you have control tactics, defensive tactics, whatever you want to call it, your hand to hand stuff, learning to cuff, learning how to take people down, transitioning to your Batman belt and all that stuff. Now for DEA, um, did they do that throughout the entirety of the academy, or was it like, all right, week, 4 through 6, we're gonna do all the control tactic stuff, and then weeks 7 through whatever, you guys switch it up and you go into whatever different things? Was it? How was it?
Well, from my perspective, it was an awesome training academy. It prepared us very well. Like we did real surveillance operations in Northern Virginia, in Washington D.C. area, and
While
so
you were in the academy?
we get government vehicles. We went out. They had
Holy shit!
scenarios where they had instructors that were playing bad guys and doing undercover deals and in hotels, and
What?
it was really cool. And
That's awesome.
yeah, I mean, other agencies, I'm not gonna name them, but they do stuff inside the academies, and it's not realistic. And then you get to the real
Right.
world, you don't know what you're doing. So, you do wiretap exercises, of course, defensive tactics and physical fitness and shooting, a lot of tactical shooting, and it was very intense, very well organized. My hat goes off to all the instructors and the counselors that were there at the time, and they still do a good job at Quantico and the DEA Academy gets their agents well prepared. But like there's one thing going through an academy, then you get out there in the real world. The
Yeah.
first time I was on a deal in Long Island, the guy had a live hand grenade in his car and a loaded 38 underneath his leg when we went to take him down.
He
So
had a hand grenade?
yeah, live hand grenade. He was a former military guy and he had a hand grenade. I never asked. I can't remember what his plan was with the hand grenade, but again, I'm not a hand grenade expert, but it didn't it didn't look too good when we opened up the glove box and found it. And it was actually in the console.
Damn, do you think he had it just a bragging rights, or you think that?
Probably, yeah, he was a tough guy.
Yeah.
And from what I remember, the bomb squad came and it was actually, I don't know the terminology, but it could have done some damage. Let's put it that way.
Fuck.
Yeah.
That's I've okay, so we got the cartel down here,
Yeah.
and the
I follow
worst
that closely.
the worst that I have seen so far is you know what? This may be a good time to tell this story. I don't think I've told this one on the podcast yet. This is probably one of my best stories, and you will have some insight on this. So I get a call that there is I use I'm how I am with you right now. Like I talk to everybody, even the valets. So I'm a bike cop, like bicycle, like downtown, 21 Jump Street, the whole nine. And I talk to the valets. There's quite a few valets down there, and they're a wealth of information anyway. So I always give them my personal cell. And I get a call one day. He's like, "Hey, dude, there's a guy that does not fit in here, and I think this car's stolen." And I'm sitting there, I'm like, really? Like, why do you think it's stolen? He goes, just come down here. You'll understand. So I roll down there and I see this guy sitting at the bar. He's inked up, Aryan tattoos, swastikas, the whole, typical movie scene white supremacist. So I'm like, whoa, you're right. He does not belong down here. What the hell is he doing at this hotel? Because this hotel is expensive. And he's like, that's the car he brought. So I run the plate real quick, comes back, it's stolen. So if I say 60, that means stolen. That's one of our codes. Sorry, guys. So run the plate, it is stolen. And so I call for backup. I'm like, he doesn't know I'm there. Nobody looks for bike cops. So so I get the cavalry. We get him hooked up. And I just start asking him some background question. I'm like, do you have a room here? Like, what's the deal? He's like, yeah, I'm with my girlfriend up in room, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, okay. Anybody else up there? No. I'm like, okay, cool. And I remembered asking the specific question, like, did you rent this room or did she? She did. Oh, okay, cool. So find out from the clerk what her name was or whatever she registered under. Go knock on the door. She invites us in. Crazy. Get in there. Immediately see like paraphernalia and some meth, and I'm like, okay, let's freeze the scene. Let's back up, because now we're getting into the dope world, and that's not really my expertise at the time. So freeze the scene, call narc, call gang, uh, calling everybody just to see if they're interested to help me out. And narc calls me back of all people, and they're like, yeah, we'll come out. Well, when I walked in this room, it was a giant room. It's like one of those ones that has, a living room, a little kitchenette area. I mean, it's a fancy room. There's files everywhere, manila envelopes with all these paperwork files. So narc gets there. They do a warrant. They're trying to play it safe. Let's get the warrant there. And they let me play. I said, hey, I'm just a bike dude, but do you mind if I tag along with y'all? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. So they're like, you take this room. If you see anything of note, just write it down, but just don't move it. I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm going through, and one of the first things I see in a room is a list of a 249, M4, Mark 19, 203. Like, these are all military weapons. Like, these aren't weapons you just go pick up at the store. And I'm like, holy, and there's prices. Like, I'm like, holy shit, who's buying a Mark 19? That's a grenade launcher. So I back out. I'm like, dude, do you know what these are? And he comes and looks, and now he wasn't military, so he's like, no, I don't know what that means. I was like, these are military weapons. This is shit I use. Like, I know what these are. I was like, and these are prices. Like, this is a big deal. All the other paperwork was like stolen identity. Like, what they were doing, one of the short stories of this is they were buying identity information from these hotels. They knew some of the clerks there, and they're just getting your credit card information and stuff and paying for it. I'm like, what the fuck? So the room was littered with that type of information. I just happened to stumble upon this weapons list. And then that's when the whole thing started to come full circle. The girl was working for the cartel, and she was transporting weapons for them between like Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, like that little square there, making like 10 G's a week for them. So we get Homeland there. Homeland shows up, and they're asking her like screening questions to see if she's full of shit. And turns out she's 100% legit. She had pancreatic cancer, and she was going to die in like 6 months. She was it was like Breaking Bad. She was trying to make as much money as she could before she went out for her daughter. So she goes, I'll tell you. She goes, I knew I was going to get caught. She goes, I was either going to die or get caught. Either way, she's like, I'm going to win. She goes, all I'm asking, I will tell you where this guy's at, where the money goes, where this goes, all this stuff. She goes, I just want to make sure that my money stays with me and it goes to my daughter. And they're like, okay, as long as this stuff pans out, that's a deal. And I didn't realize Homeland had that type of freaking power where they could do that stuff on the scene, freeze assets, all sorts of crazy stuff. But yeah, it was like Breaking Bad. So you as a DEA guy can respect a story like that, and me just being a little lowly bike cop. So I didn't get to see the follow-up, obviously. But from my understanding, all the information she'd given on the scene was legit and it had been vetted. So is that the type of shit you're into?
If you're law enforcement, stop and listen to me right now. If you're a police department that does not have an LPR system, Insight is offering the first 10 agencies, that means one agency apiece, gets one camera for free. You have to tell them that 2 Cops 1 Donut sent you. You heard me right. If you're a police agency that does not have an LPR system yet, or does have an LPR system and you're not happy with the product you have, Insight is offering you a free camera. No strings attached, and they will install it. I have 10 to give out. Tell them 2 Cops 1 Donut sent you, or reach out to me, and I will get you in contact. If you're a business owner or an HOA, please stop and listen to me right now. If you're just listening to the audio, do yourself a favor and watch the YouTube version of this episode to get a visual of what I'm about to tell you. I want to tell you guys about Insight LPR. It's a license plate reader. If your agency, community, or business is looking to invest in LPR to help solve and deter crime or to make your community safer, Insight LPR has my vote of confidence. I've met with their team. They know their LPR LPRs, guys. They're the real deal. They bring over 75 years of collective experience to building LPR cameras and the software that supports communities across the country. The other thing I really like about this team is how much they listen to law enforcement. They understand the importance of working together with law enforcement and getting their input as they build and innovate products and their service to match the needs of law enforcement. In other words, when I complain or have suggestions to make their damn camera better, they actually do it. The Insight LPR team is extremely passionate and takes pride in their product development, which makes their cameras some of the most durable cameras in the market. For the gear nerds out there, what that means is this stuff's made of military grade aluminum and is nitrogen purged, whatever that means. This design makes the cameras rugged and able to withstand harsh weather elements. Here's the big selling point for me. Their nighttime scan accuracy is higher than most of the leading competitors. In my opinion, this is what sets them apart. As we know, the majority of crimes occur at night, so it's critical to have high scan accuracy at night. Insight's cameras check the box with the nighttime plate read accuracy greater than 96%. 96%, guys. That's pretty freaking high. If your community is looking to invest in LPR technology, reach out to one of their experts today or reach out to me. Tell them 2 Cops, 1 Donut sent you.
Yeah, I mean, that's happening every day. The country's inundated right now with Mexican cartel operations in every city all around America. Stories like that. They're coming into America to buy mass amounts of weapons. They're transporting the weapons down to Mexico. They're flooding the country with historic levels of fentanyl and methamphetamine. They're killing our kids at a level that we've never seen in the history of the country. They're killing more Americans than any terrorist organization in the history of the country. They're building up weapon systems. They have drones. They drop explosives. They have unlimited funding. They're making billions of dollars now from the damn migrant smuggling because the border's wide open and it's continuing to get worse. And so, yeah, it's a disaster. And they are running Mexico. They control the soft on crime, corrupt leaders in Mexico. And so basically, they are also all over America. And when I was an agent in the DEA at the end of my career, I would keep track of the greatest hits. I would call them on my phone, all these murder scenes. I was getting the pictures. I was the head of the operation. So I demanded pictures around the country because I wanted to just be able to demonstrate the level of violence. I mean, heads decapitated, limbs cut off with chainsaws, heads posted on fences. They take a head, put it on a fence post, and put a note around the head. One of the photos I had, which is, I say my favorite, but it was the most graphic. They were trying to intimidate a rival cartel, so they sent a gift to one of the families, and they opened up the gift. It was a cooler. When they opened up the cooler, it was 5 heads in the cooler in blood. And I had never seen this. I wasn't a street cop in New York. I never came across homicide scenes like this. But we had just a long history of watching the Mexican cartel violence in America, not just in Mexico. Okay. So they're over the border, they're in our cities. And what you described is very common all over the border. Actually, I was just reading a book about an ATF agent who was involved with Fast and Furious, but they're sending people up here every day. They go to the gun shops, they buy these guns legally, and then they bring them back down to Mexico for the cartels. This is very common, and they get paid a lot of money. And then, of course, those guns are used for massive violence in Mexico.
Yeah, we just Texas, we just massed our National Guard on the border.
Yeah.
There was a video released. Somebody's riding down what I would call a frontage road, what seemed like on the border there, and you just hear automatic gunfire erupting. I'm like, that's on the damn border. Like they need to. I'm glad that they're putting the National Guard down there. Shoot, I'd say keep them on a permanent exercise where they're just running the border and keeping the riffraff out, because like you said, in the DFW area where I'm located, I mean, we got massive cartel, human trafficking, dope, and the dope is a totally separate thing, but the human trafficking thing right now is just unmeasurable.
That's one of the things the average people don't understand. Like the money that they're making from the human trafficking, charging anywhere from like $2,000 to $20,000 to get people into America. The cartels are making billions, not only from the drugs that are killing at record levels, but the migrant smuggling, human trafficking, sex trafficking, these poor kids that they're, abusing and the stash houses all along the border, piling each other on top of each other, no water, no air condition, totally inhumane conditions, putting them in tractor trailers, watching people, absolutely bake from inside out, like the one in San Antonio, like 53 dead
Yep.
migrants because they dumped them in the back of the tractor trailer and it got like 125 or whatever degrees. So yeah, it's a major shit show, okay, and it's getting worse. And that's what happens when you don't have leadership that understands what's going on and not listening to the people that are the experts.
Yeah, I had Matt Thomas from Pinell County, Arizona.
Yeah, I know, Matt.
Yeah, Matt's a good dude, and he was laying out some stuff that I was unaware of. I mean, we do get some FBI annually. We get like an FBI update on cartel activities over the year and the stuff that they're doing. So I see the level of violence, like you said. Yeah, you're not underselling it at all. I mean, I've seen where they set up a soccer field and they placed the heads strategically like it was a soccer game to send a message to this whole city. And I was like, what the fuck? I mean,
Yeah,
they skin people alive. Uh, they just it's like they're trying to one up each other. It's a failed country,
yeah.
as far as
Failed
I'm.
state, narco state, and those
Yeah,
are narco terrorists. They're not drug cartels. Never call them drug cartels ever, because they're no longer drug cartels. They're narco terrorists at the highest level.
yeah. That's what Matt and I were talking about. Is like, what does it take for our country to label these, to put them under that label of terrorists? I don't understand why that doesn't happen.
Well, you may be able to see, and we'll get into this later, but behind me is all my collages I've been making with all the dead kids, all these kids as young as 13 years old, dying in their bedrooms around the country at record levels that no one's paying attention to. They have the drug stigma. They shouldn't have been taking the drugs. That's fine. The problem is right now in America, mental illness off the charts, depression off the charts, anxiety off the charts, and the kids are turning to medication for help, but they don't know the medication they're taking is all tainted with fentanyl from these
Yeah.
dirty, filthy labs in Mexico. And Chinese lab operators are the ones sending all the chemicals to make it, and that's an absolute deliberate act to destabilize and destroy America. And the American government is sitting back and not paying attention to it as it's escalating daily with these synthetic drugs that we've never seen in the history of this country.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I see it a lot in the streets where we're at, to the point where we finally got the fentanyl. What is it called? Narcan.
Narcan,
Narcan. Yeah, we're all issued that stuff. But it's mostly for ourselves or for our partners. It's not necessarily for people in the street, which doesn't mean I'm not going to use it if I see somebody I suspect is having a fentanyl overdose. But yeah, we're grossly unprepared for that. But I don't want to hit on that just quite yet. I want to go back to y'all's training. I'm very interested in the fact that you guys were going out in the real world and doing training ops. That is, you don't hear that.
Well, that's why, and I'm not trying to like brag about DEA, but the
No,
one thing,
brag about it.
well,
I like, this is shit people need to hear.
one thing about DEA that is kind of like unknown is that DEA agents over the years have been way more concerned about doing the job, protecting America, as opposed to talking about how great they are. Unfortunately, the public never really learned about how good the DEA is. And by the way, the DEA is not just doing good work in America, but they are positioned in over 65 countries. They have like almost 100 offices in 65 countries. They have the largest footprint of law enforcement investigators around the world, more than any other agency. And they're not sitting in the embassy with their sport coats on and their ties. They're out with the counterparts making investigations happen, okay, and building up evidence to charge individuals in America. When I was running this special operations division, the cool part about my job is I had 5 international teams that I would deploy around the world, work with our counterparts, work with the DEA around the world, and we would develop evidence to try to charge these kingpins and these massive transnational criminals and get the evidence and then set up sting operations to get them, captured in these countries, put them on jets, bring them back to America, mostly New York City, and charge them. So you may have heard recently about this arms trafficker, Russian arms trafficker, Victor Bout, that
Yeah.
President Biden swapped for Brittany Griner, who is the WNBA player who's sitting in prison in
Yeah.
Russia. We made the case. My guys at the Special Operations Division, working with DEA around the world, we're the ones that developed the conspiracy case to take Victor Bout out in Thailand. And so the thing is we DEA doesn't just go after drug traffickers. Just last week on Nat Geo, there was a special on Operation Titan. That was part of DEA's effort to infiltrate the terrorist organization Hezbollah, who is working with the Mexican cartels, making hundreds of millions of dollars. And we infiltrated them. We took down a lot of bad guys. We seized a lot of money. But these are the kind of things that the DEA doesn't get recognized for. You know, we took all these kingpins off the playing field in Afghanistan, as an example. If you look at Time magazine many years ago, there was a picture of Haji Bashir Norzai. He was a tribal Taliban kingpin. The military was trying to kill him for years. We actually sent our informants into the Afghanistan, convinced them, blah, 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 blah. He gets captured, brought back to America. You know, so he's in, you know, he was in jail in America because of the DEA efforts and our capabilities with informants and developing investigations. But the point is that DEA has done better over the years at advertising what they're doing, but they're still operating under the radar. They're very powerful. The culture of DEA has always been type A, very aggressive, you know, very passionate about the country and the mission of keeping this poison off the streets and saving lives.
So I was unaware. I'll touch on it since you brought it up. I was unaware that the DEA had a footprint anywhere outside of the U.S. I guess. Maybe that's common knowledge. I guess I just I never, like I said, I never sat down with a DEA guy. So because I just thought it was a CONUS thing, not going outside of the country. So going outside the wire, I guess you could say, is we have a footprint throughout the
Absolutely. And
world.
we call that a force multiplier. So what DEA has been very good at, and I never worked overseas, so I can't take any credit for this, but I actually was, like I said, running DEA special operations for the last 10 years of my career. So I got the luxury of the great work being done overseas by our DEA agents working with the counterparts. Everything that we do in this world is about building relationships. So DEA agents on the ground in Colombia or Mexico or Afghanistan or Turkey, wherever, they build relations and they build trust with the counterparts. So when we have bad guys that we want to go after and do wiretaps or do, you know, informant meetings, undercover deals, the counterparts work with us. And they, of course, do the work because we can't unilaterally, well, I shouldn't say we can't, but most of the time we are not working unilaterally. We're working with the counterparts, and they're the ones leading the investigation, but we're providing the guidance and the intelligence to help go after these bad guys. Like Chapo Guzman, as an example, Sinaloa cartel leader. Before I retired, we went down to Mexico. We had a big meeting in the embassy. We put all the cards on the table. We worked with the interagency partners, developed all the intelligence in America, provided that to our country team in Mexico, headed by a DEA regional director. They made the decision to give that intelligence to the Mexican Marines, and they went out and they captured Chapo Guzman. It wasn't DEA that captured him and put the handcuffs on him, but it was the DEA efforts working with our interagency partners, putting it together, providing like this intelligence on a silver platter, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, focused intelligence, multiple agencies, the greatest patriots in America. Here you go, Mexican Marines, go get them. And they're the brave ones that go on the front lines. And of course, the first time when we hit Chapo's house in Sinaloa, he went into the bathtub escape route into the sewer system, out, and we lost him. And then we eventually got him. And it's a long story we could talk about later. But my point is DEA understands the power of relationships. And I'm not talking about the bureaucrats that sit in the embassy. I'm talking about the worker bees, the cops on the street. You're a cop on the street. The DEA can't do our job without the cops on the street. One of the things I give my father credit for with me is when I first started, I was assigned to a task force on Long Island. Nassau County PD, Suffolk County PD, New York State Police, U.S. Customs at the time, district attorneys, investigators. That's where I built up my foundation, because the cops on the street are the ones that understand developing informants, developing intelligence. They taught me when I was the supervisor in Manhattan in the task force. I supervised a team of all-star detectives, state troopers, and they taught me how to go after bad guys in New York City. So we appreciate the relationships that are developed with state and locals. I mean, yeah, it's personality driven. So yeah, there's some arrogant feds out there. Of course, you know that from your dealings. But DEA tends to be more like blue collar type, willing to roll up their sleeves, go out on the street, do surveillance, go to the bathroom in the surveillance vans because there's no bathroom, instead of quitting the job, right? So that's the
Yep.
thing that I always appreciated about DEA, was the dedication to duty and the focus to accomplish the goals. And that's something that I say passionately from my heart, because I lived it for 28 years. I saw it.
Yeah, the sexiness of surveillance to people, they don't understand that 5 minutes of, the takedown and getting your guy and all that stuff. You don't see the 12, the 24, the 36, the 72 hours of sitting in a vehicle, cutting open a water bottle so you can go pee, buying Gatorade bottles if you really want to.
They look good.
You want an expert tip, using Gatorade bottles to go to the bathroom in, so you don't have to leave your spot because you got the good eye, and people don't get that part. So I'm glad you brought that up, that because that is like, you need people. It does take a unique person to have the patience to sit there and hunt. That's really what you're doing. You're hunting, and I grew up hunting. So when I'd go deer hunting, you'd be sitting for hours for nothing, and you loved it.
Yes.
but
Concept. Yep.
Yep, that's what it's like when you're doing the surveillance and stuff like that. I like hearing that perspective on the DEA, because uh, every law enforcement guy that I know, local city cops, we work hand in hand with DEA, and the U.S. Marshals and stuff like that. But the DEA they steal every single cop that we get that ever works with them, because they end up fucking falling in love with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the appeal. Just like you said, it's kind of that blue collar approach to a federal service where you're out there still kicking ass, taking names. And unfortunately, I guess you guys aren't getting that type of reputation. I don't hear anything bad about y'all, but I never hear anything good either.
Well, if you're watching the news lately, you'll hear a lot of bad. And there's a lot of good that's being pushed out now.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, I mean, that's law enforcement gets the bad rap.
Yeah.
That's why I do what I do. It's part of what I do. I mean, I support thousands of families around America who've lost their kids, so I get the messaging out about the fentanyl poisonings that are going on. But I also love supporting law enforcement in the national news and at Congress, because they are not authorized to speak openly.
Right.
Otherwise, they'll get in trouble.
That's
And
why
so
I do this.
Yeah, and that's why I get, I built up my network of friends that help feed me the current trends and what's going on and the problems out there, so I can help, push the messaging out to try to help them. Doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. We've made a lot of progress. As an example, with the awareness campaign on the fentanyl poisonings.
Yep.
I started that about 5 years ago, and at that time, nobody was talking about this stuff. And we can talk about that later too. I don't want to go out of order here, but there's a lot to talk about with that.
Yeah. Okay, so you get done with the academy, you go through your training. You guys obviously did some pretty sweet stuff. What is it like for DEA? You get your post, you go out. What is it the day-to-day like? How are you starting?
I'm gonna tell you a quick funny story, only because it involves the old man. So when I came back to New York after the academy, of course, I had the gun and the badge, and it was awesome, right?
Right.
Get back to New York. All my classmates were all assigned groups at the time in New York City, which is what I wanted. I was a Long Island kid, but I wanted to work where the action was in New York City. Well, because my father was the big boss, the head of the task force at the time, he didn't really want me to work in the same building because it was like awkward, So what he did was he worked with the head of DEA New York at the time, and he got me assigned to the Long Island office. I was working in the same neighborhood where I grew up. My office was about an eighth of a mile from my middle school. Now, the reason I tell you that, because it's kind of interesting. When I was assigned there was a list of like 20 senior agents, okay? that had put their names on the list to get out of Manhattan to get back to Long Island. So I bypassed all of these senior agents as this young punk kid out of the academy because the old man had some juice and everyone was afraid of him. So what happened was I was like a marked man now by a lot of people. They were pissed off, and
Right.
I don't blame them. And so anyway, I had to keep my mouth shut. I had
Yeah.
to just learn as much as I could, work as hard as I could. And, it was actually an interesting challenge, but it all worked out. You got to earn your respect. I mean, I was under the microscope because everyone knew my father. Everyone knew he was a crazy lunatic. He was a legend in the DEA, but he was also really well liked because he took care of his guys. But what he told me was he said, you got to work close with the cops. They have big balls and they're going to help you learn the job. And that's exactly what I learned. And that's why I attribute my success, a lot of my success, to all these guys that taught me the job as a young agent.
Hey, Eric Levine here from Two Cops, One Donut. Would you like to accelerate your investigations? Would you like 6 months of free access to a solution that will help you solve cases faster? And stop what you're doing and listen to the end of this ad to hear about this free offer exclusively for my members of Two Cops, One Donut. We would tell you right now, but those people in marketing would be upset if you didn't hear a pitch. All right. Who is Finder Software Solutions? Finder Software Solutions was built on the idea that crime and those committing a crime do not stay within jurisdictional boundaries. Yes, I'm talking to the cops out there, so pay attention. Finder's mission is to assist public safety agencies by developing affordable user-defined software applications that facilitate collaboration between law enforcement personnel to close more cases faster. That's really all you need to pay attention to. Close more cases faster. They've been in the business for nearly 20 years and currently support over 300 agencies sharing billions of records annually. Are you guys still listening? Of course you are, because you guys trust me. So listen to me. If you're interested in accelerating your investigations, then discover Finder for law enforcement, the ultimate solution for agencies revolutionizing information sharing and investigative lead generation. Experience a seamless integration of RMS, CAD, JMS, and numerous digital databases sitting alongside valuable resources like public records, facial recognition, criminal records, LPR data, vehicle information, booking images, and so much more in one easy-to-use investigative platform. Finder allows for efficient data sharing, unveiling investigative leads and criminal patterns, ultimately solving cases faster, enhancing interagency collaboration. Empower your department with comprehensive single-pane information system and redefine the way you solve crime today. All right, guys. Now that we've checked the boxes from the marketing team, back to the free stuff. Finder is giving away 6 or half a dozen, insert your corny donut joke here. Yes, that is 6 free 6-month trials to the first 6 agencies that reach out and say you heard about it on the Two Cops, One Donut podcast. This is a limited time offer and will only be available for first 6 agencies. So contact Finder at findersoftware.com/2cops1donut, all spelled out, or call them at Finder and let them know you heard about it on the podcast. Get signed up with Finder and start closing more cases. It's that easy.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up about working for your dad. So, mine was involved in a shooting like his rookie year ish. I think it was either his first or second year. I can't quite recall. Stolen vehicle, wrecked out, chased, and he gets in this knockdown, drag out fight with this dude. Guy tries to shoot him with his own gun. He ends up wrestling his gun back, shoots and kills the bad guy. Gets the highest medal you can get for his agency. And now here I am becoming a cop, and I'm like, I'm not going to be a cop there. Fuck that. I don't want to be in that shadow. So that's exactly why. It's one of the reasons I joined the military and I became a cop at a different place. I ended up becoming a cop initially up in Saginaw, Michigan, and I was like, I don't want to live in that shadow because that.
So you, my friend, can understand 100% what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate you telling me that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I did, and eventually, we're talking about money and stuff like that, and he's like, "You make how much out there?" And at the time, I'm making like 16 something an hour, which is like a Walmart manager. He's like, "This is what you'll make here," and he tells me, and it basically triples the money. And he goes, "And guess what? The citizens here, they like you." He's like, I was like. He's like, I got 5 years left. He's like, I'm in the drop. He's like, you come down here now. He's like, you'll be your own man. I promise. You've already set your reputation up. He's like, I was like, all right, I'll do it.
That's
So
good,
then I did. I came down, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It does stink, having to deal with the look. And I still do. He's been out of the department for like 5 years now, and I still deal with it. Like I still see people say stuff like, oh, he's just in that unit now because of his old man. His old man made a call. What do they
Yeah,
call that? Having a hook or having a
yeah, the having a hook, yeah, the
yeah,
Jew
having a hook.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, and I made sure, like, we have different last names. My mom and dad never married. So, mom's final dig, I guess, at my dad was like, he's keeping my name. So, I never had his last name. So, for a while, I stayed below the radar, but it got out.
yeah, of
So,
course.
I could only imagine with your dad up as high as he was. My dad was just a lieutenant. Like, he didn't make it any higher than that. Probably because of his mouth, but I think he could. I think he would have been a good leader had he chose to go down that path, but wasn't in the cards for him. So, but all right, you get out there, you get to your post, you start making these relationships with the cops. Now, are you running operations where you just find targets? Are these targets brought to you? I mean, because your main goal is to track down drugs.
Right. At that time, I mean, I was assigned to very senior level uh, task force officers, and also I had a senior agent at the time who was very good undercover agent. And so I was learning from them. Occasionally, over time, they would throw me some informants that I would then work up the informants and lead the investigations. Once I got a little more experienced, and then ultimately at that time, back in the mid '80s, it was really important to do undercover work, like in an office like Long Island. So you go out and you buy, cocaine, or you buy, whatever the drug is. And I was learning. I wasn't very good at undercover work. I was too, like, right out of college. I looked like, this athletic kid, blonde hair, blue eyes. Like I didn't look like a drug dealer. I couldn't play the role that well. I'll tell you a funny story. One day, my Nassau County detectives gave me an informant. So we're going to buy 2 ounces of cocaine. So I go to the house and the guy's all high. He's the supplier. As soon as he opens the door, he tells the informant, "Get this guy out of here. He's a cop. Why'd you bring this guy?" And I'm like shitting in my pants because I don't know what to do. It's my first undercover. And then
Right.
he says, "All right, let's go. We're going to go for a ride and get the dope." Well, in Quantico, the first thing they tell you is never get in a car with the bad guy and drive away with him. So now I didn't know what to say. And I'm like, no, 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 I'm going to stay here. So now the guy was really paranoid. He was raised up. Now he came back. He sold me the 2 ounces of coke. He never did any more deals with me because he knew he didn't like me. And so
Yeah.
we eventually arrested him, but it's a funny story. That was my first undercover job. But there was so many opportunities to do it. I mean, I did other undercover, but like I said, I wasn't very good. But I learned a lot of different techniques. I was working with some of the best undercover guys you could ever imagine. So it was a great experience. It helped me build the foundation, going to grand jury, testifying, going to trials, testifying, developing the evidence. I would do all the paperwork. I would learn the importance of processes and chain of custody, for example, and marking evidence and all of that stuff, which is critical, like in your growth as an agent and a supervisor, to understand it all. And the best part is, and I always tell this story, if you're going to build a skyscraper, you have to have a very strong foundation. Because if you have a shitty foundation, if you build up more and more floors, the whole building's going to come down, right? So, as
Correct.
a young agent, if you have a strong foundation and you're learning the right way, or a cop, then you're going to just get better and better because you're building on a solid foundation. So, I attribute that to my partners at the time at Long Island office that taught me the best ways to do things, and really professional guys and a lot of fun.
One thing I want to clarify for the civilian side of the podcast, when we're talking about task force, you're probably like, "What the hell is this task force? What's this task force?" So, task force is typically it's a joint operations thing. So you have the DEA, you have your local police agency, you may have some staties, you could even have some FBI guys. Homeland Security now is a big thing. So when we're talking about these joint task force, a lot of times it's just a bunch of local agencies get together with gathering the same type of intelligence. You guys are all working on the same type of people, and so they'll get together with stuff like that. Now, for the DEA, when you guys were doing your task force, was it just a collaboration of DEA agents from different areas, or were you
No,
mixing with
I was
locals?
in with the Suffolk County narcotics guys, the Nassau County narcotics guys, New York State Police, Suffolk County District Attorneys, Nassau County District Attorneys, U.S. Customs, Immigration, INS at the time, no longer exists, and D.E.A. So it's a massive task force, multiple agencies, bring all your skill sets together, bring your capabilities and your laws, like the federal laws were really good with conspiracy. And so the task force guys, we would deputize them, which gives them the authorities of like a federal agent. They could travel around the world. They could carry their weapon around, the United States, just like a federal agent. They had the powers of a federal agent, and they were protected under the law operating within the federal task force. So it was a great experience. And, obviously all the agencies are involved with task forces now, because in 20 years after 9/11, there's no way you could beat the bad guys without working together, bringing the best and brightest people together with all the different capabilities and skill sets, because everybody adds value. So you can't do anything unilaterally. If you try to do it unilaterally, you're going to fail miserably. And that's kind of where we're at now in the country, where we have to figure this out, because the threats are so overwhelming now and they're coming at us 1,000 miles an hour. We have to do better on interagency operations.
Yeah, it's one of the cool parts about that I've learned as a detective anyway. I've worked with ICE a couple times. Like we keep getting this Honduran like military members over here. Like we got this one dude, he's an alcoholic. He gets a AK out and just starts lighting up people's cars and shit. Like, so we're actively trying to catch that guy. But the point I'm getting to is I've got a federal agent, an ICE agent that works under federal law versus us, we working under state law and stuff. And one of the cool parts about that is learning that our charges aren't nearly as powerful sometimes as the federal charges and vice versa. So you learn to work together and figure out what the best charge can be for somebody that is an obvious violent threat to the public. I get sometimes the public's like, oh, you guys you're just trying to jam them up as hard as you can. No, not every time, but sometimes the people that deserve it. This guy, this is his second time he's discharged a weapon in public, a large rifle like a AK, and we still haven't caught him. This dude, he ghosts. We can't find him. So, but that's my most recent example working with federal guys, and you hit the nail on the head as far as collaborating. We have to, and luckily this guy he's very cool ICE agent, and reached out to me. He's like, hey, I see you're looking for this guy. We are also looking for him. When you get him, please call me. We would like to hit him up with federal weapons charges to help y'all out. And he's like, and we'll handle all that. I was like, oh shit, I get to have the fun and you're gonna do all the paperwork? Sign me up. And that goes to show you it's not just DEA, but a lot of these federal agencies, man, they do go above and beyond to help the local law enforcement guys. And that's the key to it. Make it fun for us, and let us have the fun, but you're going to do the paperwork. You'll have us every time because it's nonstop for us. All right. So you get out there, you're working, you're doing all your first, I don't want to call them missions, but you're doing your missions. You're getting out there, and now you start to get some time under your belt. You've cruised through your first 5 years or whatever. Did you move? Did you go eventually?
I stayed there in Long Island for 10 years. Then I applied for supervisor jobs, and the one that I eventually got in 1996 was in New York City in the task force, where my father, worked and ran it for 11 years. So I worked in the New York task force from 1996, 1999 as a first line supervisor. So like a sergeant, equivalent to a sergeant, right? So I had a group of, 12, 15 guys, task force group, going after bad guys. And I was assigned as the South American heroin group, because at that time, the Colombians started getting involved with making white heroin, which was like 80 to 90% pure. And they were selling it in the Northeast in their existing distribution outlets in New England, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia. And so the country was getting inundated in the early 90s, mid 90s from white heroin coming out of Colombia. And the Colombians were taking advantage of the addicted population, because at that time, the opioid pills like Oxycontin was being pushed out, and, the doctors were being irresponsible with overprescribing. and these kids were getting addicted, so they would turn into the heroin on the streets, which was being sold for $10 a bag, and they were getting, really high because the heroin was 80 to 90% pure.
Damn. The only thing we run across now is the black tar stuff.
Yeah, but even now, like heroin in America is almost gone. It's all fentanyl, it's synthetic drugs, and we'll talk about that. But at that time, my mission was to expose the South American heroin operations, and I was assigned to a very elite group of detectives and state investigators, and was kind of spoiled because there's a saying in life, right? You're only as good as the people working for you if you're a leader. And I, more than ever now, appreciate what these guys did for me to make me look good as we went after the biggest Colombian heroin traffickers in the world at that time.
Yeah, the best thing we can do as supervisors, I'm about to promote to sergeant myself. So the philosophy I've always picked up from my dad is you just provide your guys with the tools they need to succeed. Whatever they need. As long as you do that, they will shine. So sounds like that's what you were doing with your guys. Now, did you do any prep work? Because I wouldn't know anything about a South American heroin dealer or the drug
Funny you
trade.
say that. No, I was thrown into a fire like you can't believe because the boss that we had at the time is a legendary DEA agent, Bill Moakler. He was I can go on all day. This guy's my mentor. He was amazing individual, but another nut job. I say that in a New York loving way.
Right.
This guy he had a vision. He's the guy that, went after the Cali, the Medellin cartel for years. He was like one of the best ever in the history of DEA. Very well-known guy. So he was the head of the task force, and he had a vision that the Colombians were going to start getting involved with the white heroin, but unfortunately it was going to cause a lot of deaths in America, especially young kids that now can snort heroin instead of using a needle. And because they were actually selling such high pure heroin, this boss of mine recognized that if you're buying 90% heroin at the street, you're very close to the source of supply in Colombia. So there's only a couple of jumps. Whereas in the old days of heroin, you were buying heroin 5% at the street. There was a lot of cutouts. So an investigation was much more difficult.
Yeah.
He had a very good strategy to track these heroin groups, and he put the task on me with my team, and he really put a lot of pressure. As a matter of fact, I can tell you in 1999, I was rushed to the hospital, thought I had the big one going because of the anxiety and the stress that was put on me from doing this work in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And it turned out I was fine and everything like that. It wasn't a heart attack. It was just massive stress, anxiety.
Yeah.
It was all because of this maniac boss and the pressure that I was getting put under. And the hard charging detectives, they didn't listen very well. And like you already said, they don't want to do the paperwork.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I was responsible for all of it. So it was a great experience. I did that for 3 years. And then I went down and did my Washington time. I moved my family down to Northern Virginia and did my first tour of duty at the DEA Special Operations Division as a staff coordinator.
So just without giving away too many trade secrets or anything like that, kind of walk, your basic civilian, like, how do you even begin to start infiltrating and figuring out these levels, let's say with the white heroin trade?
Great example. And I have plenty of stuff. I do videos. So, for example, there was a massive heroin spot in New York City, in the Bronx, in Hunts Point. All day long, 24 hours a day, almost. People go to the door of an apartment building. They go inside the foyer. They get their $10 bag. They leave. So we would park surveillance vans right outside the door. We'd sit there for literally 12, 15 hours. I used to do a lot of the videotaping in the van as the supervisor, so I could be right on top of the location and be able to see what's going on. So we had people walking in there all day long, and then we'd follow them away. We'd stop them. We'd get them on board to cooperate with us so we can collaborate what's going on. Like when we see all these things going on, we could say it's heroin because they gave us heroin. We got the evidence now.
Yeah.
So we build up the case, long-term case. Then we do a federal conspiracy on the whole network because these guys were involved in racketeering, murders, heroin organization, like the maximum selling like 20,000 of these little bags a day, 20,000 times $10 a bag. That's $200,000 a day in business. So we would work on this stuff, and we'd then develop informants. The informants are the bread and butter for every criminal investigator. You get an informant. The informant is in the organization many times trying to get a benefit, a reduced jail sentence. So then they start cooperating with the DEA or other agencies. And then you use that informant to work your way up the ladder, get higher up in the organization, and take it as far as you can with developing informants, developing evidence, multiple surveillance operations, video cameras, wiretaps, whatever you need to do, whatever investigative technique you need to do to develop the evidence and further infiltrate the organization.
How do you know when it's time to pull the trigger? Like, all
That's
right,
a great question. A lot of times you're up on wiretaps and you hear about murders going down. Well, obviously, you can't let the murders happen. So you have to take down bad guys in the middle of a murder. They're going to pick up weapons. So you have to stop them on the way to the homicide scene. And then the case is kind of over. Then you got to go out and round up all your other indicted targets. But it's very difficult. You know, a lot of times when you see large loads of drugs moving, you got to take action. You can't let the drugs go into the public, consumption. So you have to go after it. So that can compromise your wiretaps. So it's very challenging. It's very difficult. It's even more difficult today than it was when I was doing it because of the technology that the bad guys are using, the encrypted apps and the movement of money around the world using Chinese nationals to move their money. It's much more difficult. But at that time, we primarily did a lot of wiretaps, a lot of communication analysis and exploitation, going after the communication. So bad guys must communicate. Just like a business, everyone's communicating. The key is finding out how they're communicating. How do you infiltrate the communications? How do you develop the evidence? Of course, you need court orders. You have to go through the U.S. Attorney's Office and the prosecutors. You have to build up your probable cause, get your court orders, get the wiretaps going, do surveillance, get video, develop all the evidence, do search warrants, develop more evidence. So it's this ongoing, like intense, relentless pursuit of the network. These are very challenging investigations. They're very labor intense. They take you away from your family. You're on their weekends. You're at night. You're not going to, lacrosse games or soccer games or birthday parties. You're out there working. That's the way it was. When I was there, it was really, really intense. And New York City is not an easy place to work either. Okay. It's even harder today with the crime and the guns. So yeah, it was really an intense experience. Like I said, when I went down in January of 1999, I knew it was time. So I put in for the job in Washington to change scenery and learn a little bit something else. And that's when I went to the Special Operations Division.
I would think going to Washington could be almost just as stressful.
Well, no, because I was smart. We have our headquarters, okay? That's downtown in Virginia. It's not even in Washington, but they say Washington. That's like what I used to call the Tower of Terror. Two buildings, 13 stories, 12 stories, whatever the hell it is, and just complete madness, dysfunction every day.
Yeah.
I was part of Special Operations Division, which was an offsite assigned to DEA headquarters. So I got the luxury of being at this offsite and not in the madness of the day-to-day, taskings that come in all day long. I was involved with supporting the field, doing their operations, providing them, information and intelligence to help them do their job out in the field, going after the cartels as an example.
Man, that is insane. That you make me want to jump ship and go work for the DEA, bro.
Sign up.
I'd lose my retirement. I'm at 18 years, man.
Yeah.
But okay, so very interesting to hear about, the way that works. And it does. It's a lot like TV. If anybody's ever watched The Wire, that's one of my favorite portrayals of taking down drugs. At least at my level, and sounds very similar. Now, when you guys get there, occasionally things go wrong. What do you do when a CI gets made, or when an undercover officer gets made, or any of that stuff? Is there protections and things that you guys do to make sure that, because citizens are going to hear this and they'll be like, why would I ever do that? Like,
well, first of all, safety and security is number one in every operation, and not just for the agents and the cops, but for the informants too. You protect them just like they were one of the guys, okay? They're working with the government, whether they're bad guys or good guys, they're still trying to help us go after the really bad guys. So
even if it's in their own self-interest.
Right. Doesn't matter. They still have to be protected. And the DEA has really, really strict policies, protocols, procedures to actually protect everyone. And that's why anytime something goes bad, they put new policies and procedures and training into place to make sure it doesn't happen again. A classic example is we've had several agents in the DEA murdered over the years during these undercover deals where they show the money. Okay. So if you're the bad guy and you want to sell me drugs, and I'm telling you, I'm this big bad guy, but even though I'm an undercover DEA agent, right?
Yeah.
And the deal is for, let's just say, 10 kilograms of cocaine for $200,000. Okay.
Fuck.
Now, you may not have
That's a
any
lot.
cocaine, but you know that I'm going to bring you $200,000. So your goal is not to sell me any drugs. Your goal is to rip my money off. You're going to take that money. When I show up, as soon as you see the money, you're going to pull out a gun. You're going to steal that money. Okay. That's what happens in a lot of these cases, unfortunately. They don't know they're dealing with DEA undercover agents, okay, or informants. So when I show up and I flash you the money, as we say, I open up the trunk in my car. I say, here you go, Eric. Here's the 200 grand. Now go bring me the 10 kilograms. Well, what happens is you're sitting there and you're thinking, I got $200,000 now. So you pull out a gun and now shit goes bad. Gun, then the team sees this. The team comes in. We got a firefight going on. And that's where it gets really dangerous in the DEA work. And just like you do in a search warrant. I had a friend of mine's face blown off in New York City in an apartment because he's going into the apartment. They're trying to search the apartment. And in the closet, the guy's sitting there with a 357 Magnum. And all of a sudden, when the closet door opens up, boom, hits the guy in the face and blows his face off. Fortunately, he lived and his face was reconstructed. But you never know what you're going to face. And you have to be prepared to deal with the emergency. And DEA does some pretty good training. And fortunately, over the years, we haven't lost that many considering. But many of these cases, I don't want to be a Monday morning quarterback, but many of these cases involve that the agent did one thing wrong they shouldn't have done. So, like, I'll give you a good example. My father was the head of the task force. He used to sign every single operational plan because he cared so much about the safety and security of his people. And he was a micromanager in that way, but everyone knew the chief cared about the guys, right? And he was a pain in the ass. Let me make sure that's clear. But in this one case, they had an undercover deal going down, and there was a New York State trooper, Joey Aversa, who now is dead, passed away many, many years ago. So it was an undercover deal. Long story short, my father signed an operational plan. He did not want undercover agents in the building. That's like a no-no in New York. You don't send your people in the building because you can't control it at all. So long story short, when they were on the street, things changed. And the supervisor on the street made a decision to let him go in. All of a sudden, shit hit the fan. The guy gets shot and he dies. So it's things like that. You don't want to be critical because, you got to make these decisions that their intent is to get the bad guys. So you want to applaud them. But it's these split-second decisions that can mean life and death. As you know, you're a street cop. It happens all the time in this country. And that's why I get pissed off when the public doesn't understand how difficult it is when a cop has to make that decision, shoot or no shoot. And so, anyway, yeah, the DEA does pretty well. And we have a good track record, fortunately. But in many cases, it's because we are lucky. Let me make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
If the bad guys want to kill you, they're going to kill you.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I love your take on the last second decisions, because I don't know any cop out there that hasn't had that happen to them, where they know policy procedures, they know their training, and yet there's something in your gut that says, I need to ignore that and I need to go this way. And a lot of times it works out for us.
Yeah,
Like
I
you
mean,
said.
look, I never forget. I was in a van. We got the hit signal. The guy was going to sell like 6 kilograms of cocaine to the undercover agent. As we're approaching the van, he goes around like this. He's got a gun in the small of his back, and he's reaching for the gun to shoot. And it was a split-second decision. We could have killed him, but we didn't shoot. We grabbed him instead, and we slammed him down on the ground. We got the weapon. Nobody was hurt, but somebody could have shot, and it would have been justified. Yeah. But, you never know. It goes so quick.
Yep. And that's a there's quite a few videos where We train officers. We'll show them the where cops get killed is we're typically behind on the draw. So what we end up doing is we see them drawing and we make that fatal decision that we are also going to start drawing. Well, you're already behind the curve. Sometimes the best thing you can do is exactly what you guys did, is get the hell in and grab them and try to disrupt their OODA loop as far as that
So,
draw
Eric,
goes.
let me make something really clear because I might not have been clear about this, and I want to make it clear. The DEA is not dressed in a uniform. The DEA has plenty of time to prepare. They have plenty of resources when they go out on these operations. They have plenty of gear. They have manpower, like I said, and they are catching the bad guys with the element of surprise. Okay. So we have an advantage in most of these cases. Where if you're a uniform cop in America, every single day you leave your house and you go to work, you get that 911 call. The cops are going in there, they're going into dangerous territory. And you notice this is what you do for a living. I'm just telling you, I really appreciate it. So I want to cover it. When a cop shows up, you don't know what's behind the door. You don't even know who's there. You don't even know, like, yeah, it's a domestic dispute, and you figure you go there, whatever. I know things have changed now. We're a little bit smarter now on these things. Now the guy's got a shotgun behind the door. He just wants to kill the cop that shows up. And the cops have the dangerous job. Agents, yes, it's risky. Don't get me wrong. Things can go bad, but it's the day-to-day law enforcement in uniform every day that have these dangerous jobs. I mean, look, they're being executed in police cars around America for
Yeah.
no reason. So, like, I don't want to over like hype the danger of a DEA agent. It's pretty much common sense that if you're dealing with narcotics, drugs, that it's a dangerous job.
Yeah.
But it's not like the movies. It's not Narcos, right? Where every day you go out and some Mexican cartel guy is following you
Yeah.
to shoot you in the head. That's not realistic.
Yeah. All right. Let's shift gears, sir. I want to get into what you're up to today because it sounds like you had a pretty damn impressive career, that at least the first 15 years until you moved to Washington.
Well, what happened was, real quick, I'll do this quick. When I left
Okay.
down at Special Operations as a GS-15, I got promoted, became a ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in Charge.
That's as high as you can get, right?
No, I'll tell you what happened. So I get back to
Okay.
New York City. I become a field ASAC. That's like the number 2 in command, right? Like you have
Right.
a SAC, you have a deputy SAC sometimes, and you have your ASACs, okay? So I became a field ASAC supervising 5 groups. So now it's more like a lieutenant, let's say, okay?
Okay.
Then I got promoted into my father's job in the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force. So the
Oh.
administrator of DEA gave me the job. I even have the Rolex that they gave the old man when he retired.
Was
Okay.
your dad was your dad still alive when you got that
Yeah,
spot?
I got the job in his seat, New York Drug Enforcement Task Force, 1983, 1984. Here's his Rolex. I got it from him when I got the job because he was sitting in his safe deposit box. I said, Pop, give me that damn watch because I'm now the chief. So he was proud or whatever, right? So I did
Yeah.
that a couple of years. That's now I'm in the senior executive status of the DEA. Then I go down to Washington. I get promoted again by Karen Tandy. She
Hold
was
on.
head
Hold
of
on.
DEA.
Hold
Yeah.
on. Let's not I like this moment because my dad is in law enforcement too. So you get this position. What's the old man saying about you taking this
He's
spot?
crying at this point because he couldn't believe it. Like in my life, I couldn't have dreamed to be in his seat, in his office, running the most elite task force in America and the oldest task force, drug task force in America, 1970. And my father was such a legend. It was like, it was such an amazing feeling. So unfortunately, I was only able to do it a couple of years. And then I got promoted into Washington to run this special operations division in Northern Virginia. Like
Was
I
it
grew up.
because of your successes in his position?
Well, there's a couple of things. The administrator of DEA, Karen Tandy, she worked with me in the old special operations division. Okay. So she knew my work ethic, my passion, my enthusiasm, and the way I treated her was very professionally. And she really liked me, and she became the administrator. Now, we never knew she was going to be the administrator. And then when she needed somebody to run the special operations division in 2005, she chose me because she knew the place was a monster. It needed somebody that had the work ethic. But more importantly, and this is what I say, and people don't have to believe this stuff, but I want to tell you. Prior to 9/11, I was in the Special Operations Division. I saw all the shenanigans with the information sharing failures. I was very passionate about that, but I couldn't make a difference at the lower level. 9/11 hits, the world changes. 2003, my brother dies in Afghanistan. Now, mentally, I'm on a mission to try to make a difference in this country, to keep my brother proud, right? Like, what would my brother want to do? So
Yeah.
I used to put a picture up, his last day alive in Afghanistan, right over my desk. And every day I was reminded, what would Mike want me to do? Then I get promoted to this SOD thing, which is Department of Justice multi-agency operation to synchronize efforts against bad guys in a post 9/11 world. It was a monster of a program. Well, I had the passion and enthusiasm and the drive, not only because I loved what I do, because my brother was pushing me. So it was meant to be for me to be in this position at that time. That's why I built the place from 9 to 30 agencies. And I even brought in the NYPD because I knew how important they were in the global war on terrorism to help us unify our efforts to go after these bad guys. So Ray Kelly had called me, his front office called me for a briefing. I went up there. After a half-hour briefing, he said, Derek, how do I get one of my guys into SOD? I said, they could start Monday. He said, Derek, that's bullshit. I worked in Washington. You feds can't get anyone in the building that quickly. I said, Commissioner, as long as the guy has a security clearance, I will bring him in my building that day. I promise you. So I got Lieutenant Jimmy O'Sullivan, greatest guy I've ever met, almost one of the greatest guys I ever met, from NYPD intelligence, assigned to SOD in 2011. Anyway, bottom line is that I was there because it was meant for me to be there. And I stayed there about 10 years because I had a lot of passion for not only the DEA, but the interagency. And we were producing some really good results because of the great people working for me and also the great agents around the world. But I didn't want to leave when I retired, but I had to make a little bit more money and try to support my family with the kids going to college, a lot of opportunities. But when I left that place, then I got another calling from God. And that calling was, somebody's got to help these families that are losing their kids. Because I watched the evolution of the fentanyl crisis with the Chinese synthetic drug bombing on America starting around 2008. I watched the DEA take down the first large fentanyl lab in Toluca, Mexico in 2006, when middle America was getting inundated with fentanyl in 2006. And no one even knew what the hell this shit was.
Yeah.
So I watched this evolution. So I wanted to give back. So I got a job with a software company. It helps pay my bills. It's a great company that provides technology to law enforcement. So it's right in my area of expertise. But I also get to go out and do national news and podcasts and everything I could do to spread awareness. And you can see behind me, I'm very proud of this collage project I started, a few years ago. And the purpose of it was to make sure everyone in America knows that real kids are dying. These aren't just drug addicts. These aren't kids that basically are just helpless kids. These are kids that are going to college, trying to make a future. So I'll give you this story right off the bat. Here's Alex Capilouto. I hang her up on my wall, and this is why. I was going to the Arizona border a few years ago. I got this in the mail, and I got this letter. Derek, please take Alex with you to Arizona. She should have been graduating from Arizona State University this year. She was killed by a single counterfeit oxycodone pill that came across the border. Thanks for everything you do. God bless. Alex's dad. Here's a 21-year-old beautiful kid going to graduate ASU, goes home on Christmas break, and mom finds a blue in the bedroom dead. So when I started seeing this stuff, I got totally crazy passionate that I'm going to help these families. And that's been my mission. We had a rally a couple of years ago at the Chinese embassy downtown D.C., started spreading awareness. I went and testified at Congress. I brought all these collages. You could go watch it on YouTube, throwing these things up, holding them up, showing all these congressmen and women that knew nothing about this, and started stirring up the pot on national news, changing the narrative from drug overdoses to drug poisonings. This is China's destabilizing of America, destroying our future generation. And most Americans have their heads up their ass and not paying attention to it. This is not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. Every American should care because China is dominating in the drug crisis right now. And especially now, they're picking up millions and millions and millions of dollars from the drug cartels all over America. and they're laundering money like we've never seen in the history of this country. And most Americans are not paying attention to this. This is a huge national security threat. So this is what I've been fighting for. Literally, I did a documentary, for example, with Sarah Carter from Fox News and some other American patriots. I did that. It's called Not in Vain. I'm sorry, Not in Vain was the first documentary we did, because there was a beautiful young girl in Ohio, Marin Riggs, who died, and her mother, Heidi, got with Sarah Carter. We did this film, and then we started realizing how bad it was when I learned of this admiral from the U.S. Navy got the call in 2017, Sandy Winterfeld, his son, University of Denver, freshman, dead in the dorm from fentanyl. The next day, Eric Boland, used to be a Fox News, now he's Newsmax correspondent, 8 o'clock show. His son, dead, got the call day after Admiral Winterfeld. So now I started getting really focused on this topic and starting doing more research, talking to the agents in the streets of D.E.A. Now I'm retired now. And I do this, and I work with the nonprofits all around the country. I hooked up with the Lost Voices of Fentanyl. I go out and I speak at conferences around the country. I go on the TV, like I said, I do podcasts, I do radio shows, anything I could do. And by the way, I don't take any money from anybody, because this is about giving back so we can save some lives and we can support the army of families that are doing God's work, because the government is sleeping. And I will tell you this, what really pisses me off is that the number one story I hear from thousands of families is that they didn't even know what fentanyl was. They never heard of it. Their kids had anxiety. We all have anxiety. Look at me. I'm like a lunatic right now, screaming and yelling. We all have anxiety. We all have issues. We all have family problems, no matter what, we can admit it or not. So people do want to use medicine to help them because they see mom and dad using Xanax. Xanax, when it comes from CVS, is a great drug if the doctor prescribed it to you. But if you buy it from your friend, or you get a pill from the street, or you go on social media, it's going to kill you. So the kids don't hear this because the kids are not listening to this podcast. They're not watching mainstream media. They're not watching cable news. They're watching video reels all day long on TikTok, Facebook, social media, Instagram, whatever. Here's the problem. I've been asking the government very loudly. If you check my March 1st testimony, you'll hear it. I want the White House to use social media influencers, celebrities. I want them to use role models and professional athletes to do 45-second videos, put them out on social media so the kids see them. Otherwise, they're going to continue to die.
Yep.
And this is my thing. There's a documentary called Dead on Arrival. It's 21 minutes long. It's the most impactful video I've ever seen. My friends, I work with all these families. They tell the story of what happened with their kids. I would recommend that every family in America sit down with their kids, their grandkids, their nephews, their nieces, and watch this 21-minute film. There's no excuses because it's not long. It will keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time. And that's why I push it out there. I have no vested interest in this at all, but I know how powerful it is. I use it in every presentation that I do. And I know that anyone in America that watches it will really get a wake-up call. So anyway, so what I've been really doing is, of course, I do my job. I love working with law enforcement. I love supporting law enforcement. I stand up for law enforcement in the news every time I'm on the news because they can't stand up for themselves. I tell the truth. I get real-time information from law enforcement around the world, for that matter. I try to get the public the best and most accurate information, and I try my best to stay out of the politics. I get pulled into the politics, unfortunately, but it's not by choice. Like, for example, Joe Biden in December of 21 told America that the international drug crisis is a national security threat to this country. Okay. In the end of March, Mayorkas, our Homeland Security Secretary, said that the deaths from fentanyl is the single biggest challenge we have in America. But yet, together, this administration has allowed a wide open border where the cartels operate with impunity, work with these Chinese criminals that want to destroy our country, and yet they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. So how can I not be political with that? Because it's common sense. I don't care who's in the White House. You can't say this is a national security crisis and then not be accountable for what you're doing at the border. It's not making sense. And what's going on now with the end of Title 42 is a major shit show for everyone in America. I don't care if you voted blue or red, doesn't matter. Wait till they come to your city. Wait till they go to your schools. Wait till you have 20 languages. Wait till you're paying your taxes. Wait till you go to damn hospitals and you sit in the emergency rooms, because they're all going to be in the emergency rooms. Now, my heart goes out for these people. I'm very big supporter of immigration, but legal immigration, not illegal immigration. My friend Tom Holman, the former ICE director, he said it perfectly. It's now legal to be illegally in America, here in America. Like, think about that. They're sending mixed messages. You wonder why the kids are screwed up. And you wonder why the depression, the anxiety, because our own government is creating it. You know, I could go on all day, dude. You get me started up with this because, I mean, I live this every day. But most importantly, like, people in the national news media at times have said, Mr. Maltz, you know, tone it down. You're a little quiet. I had one of the congressmen in Tennessee, Steve Cohen. Mr. Maltz, can you please tone it down? No, I can't turn it down. Kids are dying at record levels, and you got your head up your ass. You know, and that's
Yeah.
the problem. So like I can only go at one level when it comes to these kids and these families, because it's heartbreaking. Now we're making the collages with the families with only teenagers on them. And when you see these beautiful kids, they could be anybody's kid. They are not drug addicts. They are kids. Sometimes they had a problem, they had anxiety, whatever it may be. Sometimes you do get some kids that are addicted to opioids and then they go to the street. But a lot of these kids are not what people think. And the stigma on the drug crisis is totally wrong. People are turning away from it because they say, the families, they weren't paying attention. This is a family issue, whatever. No, it's not. It's everybody's issue because it's impacting our country and our future.
So 2 questions. Sorry, you were on a roll. I was going to let you keep going. So,
Right.
2 questions. One, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you
can
have
put me on the
any
spot.
numbers to, like, help people, like, kind of
Oh,
realize what the hell we're talking about here?
okay, what numbers do you want? I got numbers out my ass. What do you want?
So, like, number of deaths that
Okay, real simple. Last year, the CDC put out about 107,000 Americans died from drugs. They claim about 70% are from fentanyl. But when you look at the real stories from the medical examiners, like in New Orleans recently, 95% of the quote unquote overdose deaths, drug deaths, were fentanyl related. When you look at the stats coming out of California from the sheriffs in Orange County, 2,200% increase in fentanyl related deaths over the last 5 years. When you look at the recent CDC stats, 280% increase in fentanyl deaths from 2016-21. When you look at the seizures of fentanyl in this country, here's an example. When Donald Trump was in office, the first 6 months of 2020, there was 1,326 pounds of fentanyl seized. That's a lot of fentanyl. But you know what they've seized this year, first 6 months? 13.9 thousand pounds. 948% increase in fentanyl seizures just at the border. You know what the DEA seized last year in fake pills in America? 57 million pills. You know what the DEA lab analysis has put out? 6 out of 10 pills that they analyze in the lab have a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. You see this here? See this vial right here? This is 30 grams of salt. If this was fentanyl, that's 15,000 dead Americans. Okay? So the magnitude of death and destruction is beyond comprehension because this is a chemical weapon. We don't look at this as a chemical weapon. We look at this as a drug that people shouldn't be using. But they're deceiving the customers because the customers are not, most of the customers are not taking these drugs to die. When we grew up, Eric, we learned from mistakes. We all made mistakes. In this country now, the kids are dying from a mistake because they snort, you know, a little bit of this or a little bit of that. They think they're taking cocaine. So let me go on and further some stats, okay? So people know. in the first 6 months of Donald Trump's presidency in 2020, there were 236,000 apprehensions on the border. Okay. Now, in the first 6 months, we're at 1.2 million. That's a 420% increase. Okay. So the magnitude is huge. The DEA just had a press event in early May. They announced that this year alone, they seized 44 million fake pills in America. 44 million. So you look at the production in Mexico is off the charts. You look at the seizures at the border off the charts. The deaths are off the charts. And most Americans aren't even talking about this. So it's been very frustrating for me to try to get this train moving down the tracks. And we're making some headway now, but it's just so political. We're just not getting the traction that we need as far as, like, the thing that pisses me off, Eric, the most is, let's just stay out of politics and say, why isn't the Department of Education putting mandatory training in schools, education for the kids? Like we had in the old days, we had to just say no, Nancy Reagan thing, right?
Yeah.
But now with social media, you can blitz the world if you use the influencers. Like, you know what else pisses me off, Eric? The White House is smart right now in this sense. They're using social media influences to push out the presidential messages, the campaign messages to get Joe Biden reelected. I give them an 11 out of 10 for being smart with that technique, because they want to get the voters that are 18 to 25 years old that are not watching the news, that are not paying attention. They're uninformed.
Right.
So if they put out messages and these young kids that they're following are telling them A, B, C, and D, they're going to believe it. Okay. Why can't the White House take those same kids and start putting out messaging about stay away from pills that are not prescribed to you? I mean, you could put together so many impact videos, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. That's where the kids are learning. So why are they not doing that? Why isn't there outrage about this?
Yeah.
Parents don't know. They're setting up their own nonprofits. They're spending their own money. They're hanging up billboards all over the country. They're making educational material. They're going into schools. They're speaking to Congress. They're going on TV. These are parents that lost their kids, but they have the courage to go out and speak because they're trying to save lives, because the government is not doing it.
Because it's not happening. It's not happening in their fishbowl.
Right. Law enforcement is working their tails off across the country. Yeah. And they're doing a good job making seizures and stuff like that. And they're impacting the cartels. But the volume is so high level now that they can't seize that. We can't seize our way out of this problem. That's why I've been a huge advocate, very vocal about a couple of things. Got to declare the cartels terrorists and start treating them as terrorists, because that's what they are. But we got to use U.S. military assets, using the Mexican government to work with us, just like we did in Colombia years ago, when we got Pablo Escobar and all of those guys down there, and use the greatest technology our military and intelligence community has to destroy the command and control elements of the cartels and their labs, because the labs are producing poison to kill the kids. So it's pretty simple. If we do that, we're going to have a lot of impact. But that's never going to happen when you have soft on crime leaders north and south of the border. That's the bottom line.
What drugs is this fentanyl getting in? Because I know heroin was the initial thing, but I've heard that it's in everything now.
The primary killer right now is the fake pills that are being made with fentanyl that look like Oxycontin, Xanax, Percocet, Adderall in some cases. So that's the primary thing that's causing death and destruction. But they're also making the powder that's being, advertised as, let's say, heroin, right? So when people that have an opioid addiction go and snort some of this powder, they die, because it's not heroin, it's fentanyl. When people snort cocaine, like the kids in May of 22, 5 West Point cadets were down in Florida, South Beach, and they thought they were having a cocaine party, and they snorted some of this cocaine, but it actually had fentanyl in it, and they all went down, and they had to go to the hospital, okay? Just like recently in Hackensack, New Jersey, 5 mall workers working at the Cheesecake Factory went out for the lunch break to snort some cocaine, because historically, you didn't die from snorting one line of cocaine. Don't get me wrong, you can die, but most people didn't die. So they snort cocaine, but it's all loaded up with fentanyl. They go down. EMS has to show up with Narcan. 4 of them were revived. Unfortunately, the 29-year-old single mother died. Now, this is happening all over the country because people are not paying attention. Jimmy Hayes, famous hockey player, Boston Bruins, he's taken some cocaine. He dies. When the autopsy report comes back, the headlines in the Boston paper, beautiful family, the wife says, wife is shocked by autopsy results because they don't know about fentanyl. This guy's been using cocaine. He's an NHL hockey player. He's got the money. They've been doing it. Maybe even the wife was doing it. I don't know. But this is shocking because you don't expect people to die like they're
Yeah.
dying. And thank God we have Narcan because Narcan's saving hundreds and thousands of people every year.
So what? Okay, help me think of the long game of this because me as a drug dealer, I want repeat customers.
Yeah, great question. I'm going to tell you the answer because this is the number one question I get across the board. Anybody that talks about this, including the DEA administrator, this is the question everyone wants to know. Why would the drug dealer want to kill their customer?
Right.
Great question. But what people don't realize is the drug dealer doesn't give a shit about their customer. They only care about the money and the addiction that they're creating across the country. Because when you're taking these pills, many people have a pill addiction all day long. They're taking pills and they're not dying. So they're buying more and more pills and they're creating a frenzy with these pills. So the money's coming in like it's never come in before because this is a synthetic drug. This doesn't cost a lot to make. It only costs less than 10 cents to make a pill in Mexico. They can sell pills for $30, $40 a pill. In some cases, like an Indian reservation in Montana, $140 a pill. So the cost of doing business is if you lose some customers, no big deal. We've talked to drug dealers and asked them that question. And they say, I don't give a shit. I'm trying to make money. I don't care. That's their fault. They shouldn't have been taking it. They wanted it. I'm selling it. They don't have the hearts. They're savages. They're very greedy. They don't care about the customer. And by the way, the number one thing you have to understand is the fentanyl madness started around 2012 out of Wuhan, China. You know what Wuhan, China is, right? That's where the COVID came from.
Right.
Because they have a plan to destabilize and destroy America.
You can't call it the Chinese flu, though.
Yeah, we could call it what it is. And they started sending fentanyl through the mail, the internet services. Around 2012, we started seeing a lot of deaths, okay? And then it got worse and worse and worse over years once the cartels started getting totally involved. But they have a plan to destroy America. And they're using this chemical weapon to do it. And Americans are too stupid to understand that. And I'm sorry to say that, but I didn't go to MIT. I don't have a nuclear degree. This is pretty common sense. I can use this powder that I make in Wuhan. I could get it to the Mexican cartels. They will do the dirty work. They will be my proxy, just like Hezbollah is used by Iran as the proxy to do the dirty work. The cartels are now poisoning America as the Chinese sit back and laugh at us.
Are we doing anything with the Coast Guard, Navy, anything to block their trading ships or?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, the Air Force, not the Air Force so much, but the military has a lot of operations. They're seizing mass amounts of drugs routinely. They work with law enforcement. They're doing God's work to try to save America in this way. But unfortunately, it's in Mexico now where it's happening. I mean, the chemicals are coming in from China, but they go to Mexico, they go to the cartels. The cartels are making this poison. So it's not like our military could just go into Mexico. They're not asked to go down. And so there's limitations. That's why we got to get the Mexican government on board. But unfortunately, this Mexican president is very soft on crime. He doesn't want to challenge the cartels because the cartels are generating billions and billions of dollars in his economy. He's afraid. Yep. We just had the trial, for example. I don't know if you're aware of this. We just convicted Genaro Garcia Luna in New York City last month or the month before. He was convicted on working with Chapo Guzman and Sinaloa cartel, taking millions and millions of dollars. he was the FBI director equivalent in Mexico. So
Oh,
it's the
jeez.
highest levels of the government. We
Yeah.
we recently, by the way, extradited the former president of Honduras for the same conspiracies. We got the president's brother in Honduras, Tony Hernandez. He's in jail in New York, convicted on like 185-ton conspiracy, cocaine conspiracy with Chapo Guzman. So the corruption is off the charts. We're soft on these bad guys. So it's just going to continue to get worse. It's
That's
that simple.
crazy. I keep hearing Honduras too. That's, I mean, that's
All over
affecting me.
Central America, except the new president in El Salvador. He's the only one now tough. He's got these maximum security prisons, and all these MS-13 gangsters are getting sent there. And now the crime rate is way, way down, historic lows in El Salvador.
Um,
Interesting.
I heard that I think it was the last time the FBI gave us an update. Mexico is like made of 32 or 36 states,
Yeah.
and like 19 or 21 of them, somewhere in that range, are failed. They are totally cartel controlled.
No. The whole country is a failed country. The
Okay.
narco terrorist cartels run the place. Everything coming off the border, north and south, is run by the cartels. They're getting paid for everything. They're building up their armies of weapons. They're using drones with explosives, C4s, dropping on their adversaries. They have the best military grade weapons, tanks. They have all the armory that they need. And we're sitting back and letting them grow more powerful as they're sending the poison into America, killing our kids, killing our future generation. And we're just sitting back and talking about it.
Yeah, Matt Thomas, like we were talking about, he said they've run military style operations in our
Absolutely.
country.
Yes. Every day.
That's
There's plenty
fucking
of
insane.
Plenty of videos out there, public information type videos. You can see it.
Yeah, if that was a thing where I'm at, or there, fortunately, at least I haven't heard of it, but that would totally shift my mission in my career. I would completely, like, that's a totally different, that's a love of country thing for me. Like, you are not coming over here with your military style terrorist agency and running ops in my country.
So, Eric, 2 points I want to make on this whole topic. Number one, what the average American doesn't know and doesn't pay attention to is, like, since Joe Biden has been in office, there's about 1.5 million known gotaways in this country. And the gotaways are those individuals that don't want to interact with Border Patrol. They don't go to turn themselves in and try to get into the country. They pay the cartels much more money. They're considered high value targets for the cartels. And then the cartels escort them into the country when they know the border is wide open. They consume the Border Patrol with legitimate migrants. Then they take these high value targets up the river and they get them in. These guys are coming from China, Russia, Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan. These are the ones that are really, really concerning to me. And right now, there's about 1.5 known million gotaways. There could be 3 million because we don't know. We don't have every area covered. Now, Border Patrol could see them on the camera systems and maybe sensors, but we have areas that are wide open, so we don't know how many are here. That being said, those are the ones that could be planning the devastation of the end of America. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. And so people in America don't realize that they're in all our communities already. We don't even know who they are. We don't know who sent them. We don't know why they're here. We don't know what their motive is. Because if their motive was just to get into the country to live a better life, they would have declared themselves. Why would they pay the cartels $20,000 instead of just paying $2,500 or $3,000, whatever?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's one point I want to make, which is a concern to it should be a concern to every American, putting all politics aside. The second thing is, just to give you an idea, because I track the mass poisonings regularly. Every day I track them. So some of the recent ones, in your former state of Michigan, there were about 7 dead, 12 poisoned over a 2-day period or 1-day period. Actually, it was 24-hour period in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Then in Boulder, Colorado, during the same week, there were 5 poisoned. In early April, there were 18 poisoning deaths in Milwaukee. Okay? In 1 week in Milwaukee, not a great big city, 18 dead. Where I went to college in Onondaga at the end of March, there were 40 poisoned in a 48-hour period. In New Rochelle, New York, 3 dead in a house. 3 dead, I think the 4th in critical condition in March, at the end of March. I told you about the workers in Hackensack, New Jersey. So I could go on and on and on. And as a matter of fact, I could send it to you, but I testified in Congress on March 1st, and I put together a document, 80-something pages, but 64 pages of it was all these headline stories of all these mass poisonings around America. And I did that because I needed a visual to show these lame congressmen and women how out of touch of reality that they are. Because what's going on in America is happening everywhere. And these news articles will show it. So I had this document. As a matter of fact, I carry it around a lot because I'm a visual kind of guy. And so when I show this stuff, I want to have facts. I don't want to have bullshit. I don't want to have garbage. So this is the document I'm talking about here. 9 in El Paso, 9 in St. Paul, Minnesota, 10 dead, Will County in a weekend, 1 dead, 4 hospitalized, Grand Rapids, 5 overdoses in the racetrack in North Carolina, Gadsden County, down there at 4th of July weekend last summer, 9 dead, 7 found unresponsive in Tampa, 41 in 18 days in Atlanta, 6 dead in Alabama, 14 in Onondaga County. It goes on and on and on. 16 first week in Cincinnati, dead. 3 dead in Stamford, Connecticut. 3 brothers, African-American brothers, dead in the house in Denver. By the way, for whatever it's worth, the African community is getting hit the hardest, according to some of the stats. So where are these Democrats when they see this? Here, national news where kids are falling down by the vending machine in Texas, Delaney High School, DeCaney High School in Harris County. So I track this stuff every day, and this is part of my actual testimony. I wanted this all on the record. Guys go out to a bar in Chicago, 6 of them, boom, they drop. Most likely snorting cocaine. Montana, 28 overdoses, 8 deaths in a 10-day period. So this is what's going on. There's the chart. Seizures are being made all over the country. Again, it's just the death and destruction of the kids, the families. No one's paying attention to. People are disregarding it, and the families are fighting like an army, and that's why I've joined that army, to lead them and help them.
Okay, so I got a question. One way that I can think of to help try to fix this issue is, are we holding the dealers accountable for homicide?
Hell no. Wait, no. Not only no, but hell no.
So they're not getting a homicide charge knowing that their product...
In some areas of the country, like, for example, this month, the Los Angeles DEA, working with their counterparts, just announced another 12 or 13 indictments on these deaths. Because the U.S. Attorney's Office in California, not only in Los Angeles area, San Diego, they have what they call Task Force 10, multi-agency operation going after these death investigations. And they're actually solving them. They're actually doing a great job. But the problem is, Eric, around the country, we have what we call useless attorneys, okay? Not United States attorneys, United States useless attorneys. They don't want to work. They don't want to do the work. They want everything in with a bow on it, right? Guaranteed conviction. Well, these cases are not easy to prove. When you're trying to prove that the dealer knew they were selling fentanyl to kill someone, it's not that easy, okay? And it requires a lot of work. And so we're really not set up in this country. In some areas of the country, we have very proactive investigators and attorneys that just kind of jumped in and said, we're going to do this. We're going to help. And I applaud them, and they're doing great work. But in some areas, like, I get calls every week. I get messages. My phone's blowing up with families. Mr. Maltz, my daughter died last June in Harris County, just making this up. And the local police, they took her phone. I know who the dealer is. They closed the case. What the hell are they doing that for? So you start peeling back the onion. There's a lot of reasons. I mean, you work in the police department. People are busy, understaffed. They don't have the technology in many cases. A lot of times they just write these deaths off because they're saying that a dumbass kid shouldn't have been using the drugs. I'm not going to waste time investigating a drug death. They shouldn't have been doing it. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons why, but It's getting a little bit better, but we need to have like these drug homicide task forces all over the country start holding them accountable, and maybe we'll see an improvement. But again, that's going to take so long, and we're losing over 100,000 a year. As a matter of fact, let me show you something here. I don't know if you could see this. So it's a plane, right? It's a
Yeah.
lapel pin. When I do a lot of national news, once in a while, I'll put this on my lapel, and people say, "What the hell is that airplane?" Because picture a 787 Dreamliner crashing every day of the week. You asked about stats. Every day of the week, the plane's flying, 300 passengers, dead, explosion. How many days would America let that happen before they stopped it? Okay? Every day, 300 kids dead. Dead every single day, 9,000 a month, roughly. So I use this pin just to show like a little symbol, right? Just like sometimes we talk about, hold on a second here. We talk about stuff, and I'll hold this up. This is a little bit more. This is 100, this is 300 grams. Each gram can kill 500 Americans. 300 times 500, do the math, 150,000 dead. If this was anthrax sitting in Mexico, you think the government of the United States would just sit there and let it happen? We'd go destroy it regardless of Mexican cooperation or not. We got to protect Americans, and this poison is killing. Now, you wonder why this madness is going crazy, because this is what corporate America sells. This is from Amazon. I bought the shirt myself. Keep calm and let fentanyl handle it. This is a real shirt you could buy on Amazon, because they don't give a shit. They just want to make money.
Yeah.
Now, I doubt very seriously, like the leadership at Amazon knows like they're selling this stuff. But the point is no one's taking this serious. Nobody understands the magnitude of it, and nobody is paying attention to details.
What? Okay. You're king for the day. All right.
Yeah.
How do we fix it?
Well, first of all, number one, most importantly, immediately, we have to do a massive education campaign. So, assuming I'm the president, I'm calling a national press conference, and I'm calling it Public Health and National Security Emergency. I'm inviting every professional sports team, male and female. I'm inviting some celebrities from Los Angeles and New York, Chicago. I'm inviting some of these high-end, multi-million, social media influencers. I'm going to have a press conference where I'm going to make sure every American knows that this is not a drug crisis like we've ever seen. This is a poisoning, and our kids are dying at record levels. This is why they're dying, because they're buying what they think is legitimate medication because they need help, and they're taking poisonous fentanyl pills. And I would have the best and brightest, like I said, the most famous, Michael Jordan's, LeBron James, Tom Brady, J.J. Watt, all these high-end athletes, Derek Jeter, A-Rod, all of these big-time guys. And I would have them all there. And if they listen to what the hell is really going on, I am confident in their hearts they will understand this is an urgent problem. They have to step up. Right now, they're not stepping up because they don't know what the hell's going on. They think this is another drug issue. And, unfortunately, a lot of these guys in sports and Hollywood, they're smoking marijuana, they're doing stuff, whatever. I don't really care. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the death of our future. So that's number one. So once I do that press conference, I got all the mainstream media. I got everyone in America paying attention because I'm the president. And then I unleash the madness so the kids start learning. Then I take the Department of Education person in the White House and want to plan within 1 week on how we're educating every single school, mandatory education on the poisoning of our country. Okay? Like like when I was a kid, we used to go to the closet and put our hands over
yeah,
our
the
head.
duck and cover procedures. Yeah.
Now I'm going to do the fentanyl awareness to every school, and I'm going to hold them accountable for their education materials. I'm going to make it consistent across the board, okay? And I'm going to force this, and the states are going to have to do it because I give them money for education. We're going to get that done. So that's mandatory. That's got to be done. In the meantime, I'm going to have a task force set up, like similar to my old place in Washington, focused on these deaths. It's going to be multiple agencies. We're not going to have anybody, I'm in charge, I'm the king. Everyone's going to work together. And then we're going to identify the areas of the country. We're going to get these death investigations going. We're going to get good sentences. But I'm also going to be going to Mexico with the attorney general, with the vice president, with the, even myself, if I was the president, the Department of Homeland Security, DEA administrator, rolling up our sleeves with the Mexicans, say, we've had enough. We have to stand up for our American kids, and we need your help. We're here to help you. We have the resources, the capabilities. We know the cartels run this place. We're going to help go after them like they've never seen in their lives. Now, here's a simple analogy, Eric. Tell me if you think this makes sense. If it doesn't, you could tell me. I got thick skin. I learned this from a guy in Long Island who lost his nephew from fentanyl. And they said, if you had a flood in your house, and your house just had a pipe broke upstairs and the water was coming down, the floors were coming down, your house was being ruined. The first thing you have to do is turn off the main valve coming into your house. If you turn off the water, then you minimize the additional damage, right? Well, now the flood we have in the country of fentanyl is coming from Mexico. It's so urgent right now with hundreds of thousands of dead Americans, we got to shut off that valve. That's priority number one. How do we do it? Well, we can't go in there and start bombing America unilateral. I mean, we can, but that's not going to happen. They're great trading partners. They're our southern border. We want to do this collaboratively and cooperatively. We don't want to put our army down on the ground and start doing the firefights with the cartels, but we want to do precision strikes on these command and control, headquarters, leadership, labs, chemicals at the port. We want to destroy the chemicals before they can get to the port. And we will do whatever it takes because we can no longer rely on soft on crime, corrupt leaders in Mexico to save American lives. It's that simple. So there's got to be a sense of urgency like we don't have right now. So that's what I would do. That's how serious this is to me. And when I look at the magnitude of this problem growing, I'm very scared for the country's future because as we lose the future military leaders, the doctors, the lawyers, the bus drivers, the school teachers, the nurses, that's what we're losing, 100,000 a year. And I could show you my collages. These are good people. They will be successful if they had a chance to live.
Now, from here, okay, so great plan. I like it. I agree with it. I like your analogy. Since obviously they're not going to make you or I king for the day, what is the future right now for Derek Maltz in this mission? What's the future looking like?
The only thing I could do is continue what I'm doing. Ronald Reagan had a saying, and that is, if you can't get him to see the light, make him feel the heat. Okay? So I'm pretty good at making people in leadership position that have responsibility feeling the heat. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. The second thing is Jackie Robinson had a saying that a life is not important except the impact it has on others. So every day I wake up and I do what I do, I'm impacting family members. How do I know that? Because my phone gets bombarded every day from regular families around America, and I keep track of this stuff because it actually motivates the hell out of me when I read stuff like this one as an example, because this one just breaks my heart. There was a person that sent me a picture of her kid who in his graduation outfit and basically saying, thank you, Derek Maltz, for being on Fox and Friends this morning. I'm so glad someone's bringing this to the American public. It's too late for my son, but hopefully it will save someone else's son or daughter. Zachary Brown, forever 25. So it's this kind of stuff that keeps me focused on what I need to do. I will try my best to stay out of the politics, like this beautiful young girl. You can't see it maybe. Olivia Green, 15 years old, holding cotton candy with a bright smile on her face. When her mother sends me a message and thanks me so much for what I'm doing, that's all I need to motivate me to keep me focused. I'm not going to change the world. Or this picture here, fentanyl killed my daddy and my uncle, two young, beautiful young kids. So and then I look at stuff like this all day long. This beautiful lady looking over her kid who's in the coffin. So it helps me get motivated. We're going to continue to do the rallies. We had a big rally last year in September in Washington, D.C. We had one in Washington, D.C. the year before that. This year, September, huge rally. Going to have big speakers out there. Mark Morgan, former CBP commissioner, is committed to speak. We're trying to get Tom Homan, the ICE director. We got Jason Jones, Newsmax border correspondent, former DPS lieutenant, or I'm sorry, captain in DPS in Texas, Counterterrorism Center. He's going to speak. We have just a lot of momentum because the army of families is not going to stop. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's growing. Like when I joined the Lost Voices of Fentanyl, it was about 700 people on this group. Now there's 27,000. So the army is just growing. So
Yeah.
the pressure on the politicians is going to continue to grow. So that's the goal.
And it's called, let me write that down.
Lost Voices of Fentanyl is a Facebook group. I highly recommend you join it so you can see what's going on. There's an individual named April Babcock. She lost her son. Her son Austin died like at 25 years old. She lives in Baltimore. She started this to go see if there's any interest in doing a rally at the Chinese embassy. And then Virginia Krieger, who lost her beautiful daughter Tiffany, became the co-president of Lost Voices of Fentanyl. And they're building up this monster operation. And then there's so many other nonprofits, Facing Fentanyl, Song for Charlie, Families Against Fentanyl. There's so many, Demand Zero. And these are the organizations that I work with to support them any way I can.
Okay. Yeah, I will. I'll join up with that group. And then when your episode airs, dude, you've got so many good sound clip. Like I write down times as we go, right? I've learned over the 2 years of doing this, like, oh, that'll be a good clip. That'll be a good clip. That'll get the message out. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I got like 12, 15 clips just from you.
Well, just go to, if you want clips, go to my YouTube and pull. So I know that there's rights and all that stuff, but I mean, I have stuff on there.
Yeah.
My testimony, and I have things you could use that are out there. Because I've been talking about this way too long. I'm sick of talking. I'm sick of hearing myself.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, but I got no choice now. I'm committed to the families.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, each time you do that type of thing, it's hitting different groups. And with mine's kind of that. Mine doesn't really have any hold in the drug world necessarily. Mine is just cops and military guys and stuff like that. A lot of veterans and whatnot. And so I'm hoping maybe my group can at least start spreading, every little bit helps for networking.
Whatever this means, I just want you to know that the group that you're supporting and what you're doing is so important because we're losing a lot of leadership in these different elements because the way the direction of the country, cops and warriors that are fighting for the country are not appreciated when the threats are becoming more and more severe and more complex. So it's now more than ever, we need to be unifying our cops and law enforcement and firefighters and all these brave Americans that run into danger instead of run away from danger. And so keep doing that too, because that's important.
Yeah, it's crazy. The culture of the United States at the moment, anyway, is we like to focus in on the bad that we see, the really, outliers of this profession. And I don't just mean local PD. I just mean criminal justice in general. We focus in on the shitty ones, the bad apples.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It stinks that that's where the attention goes, and then we all get painted with that brush.
Right.
And at the same time, policing has learned a lot over the years as far as us not looking at criminals with that broad paintbrush, just like you're doing with the fentanyl thing.
Yep.
I mean, if you want a good example, a current example of cops not doing it, look, these people are using a drug, okay? Whether they're legally allowed to do that or not, that doesn't matter. They're a victim. And we're looking through, we're going through the narrow focus. We're looking at the big picture. So hats off to you on what you're doing. Anything that we haven't mentioned? You've been on here 2 hours now.
I want to just bring up one last thing because it's very, very serious. It's not being reported. The dots are not being connected. So I want to make sure it's clear. So right now, we have a lot of Chinese national students that are coming here legitimately for school. and they're going to very prestigious universities. They're studying, and they're very smart individuals. And on the weekend or during the week, they may get a call from Mexico from the money broker that says, I need you to go meet this guy. Here's a serial number from a dollar bill. If the guy provides the matching serial number, pick up a suitcase and then contact me and I'll tell you what to do. So the Chinese national will pick up the money from some drug trafficker in Chicago, let's say $500,000 in a suitcase, and will then be told to turn it over to a Chinese businessman in America. The Chinese businessmen want cash in America because they can't export more than 50 grand, I think, a year out of China. So when they get the cash in America, they then have the ability to buy property, buy real estate, buy farms, buy other investments, and they have the cash on hand here. All right. What they do is they go on WeChat, okay, which is an encrypted Chinese app like our WhatsApp, and they'll go to a banking app, for example, a Chinese account in China, and they'll transfer $500,000 from their personal account in China to another individual in China. So they collected 500 in America. They now have to make due on the 500. So they give it to a guy in China. The guy in China then puts together a $500,000 order of consumer goods, sneakers, clothes, computers, toys, whatever it may be. Put it on a container, ship it to Mexico. They get the goods in Mexico and they sell those goods for maybe $3 or $4 million in the flea markets, in the stores in Mexico, because they're legitimate goods. The cartel gets the 500,000 right away back to them, because that's what it is. That's how they got the order, from the 500,000 in drug money in America. So the cartels get the money, the business people make money, the economy of Mexico is doing well, and the Chinese national in America now has 500 grand, could gamble, declare the money legally, could buy real estate, buy property. A lot of these Chinese business guys are creating marijuana grow operations in Colorado, as an example. They buy a house for $1 million cash. They equip the house with the state-of-the-art, grow operation, the requirements you need for a grow operation. And then they basically sell very, very pure THC marijuana across the country. Sometimes that 500,000 that was in China creates a $500,000 order to buy more precursor chemicals to ship from China to Mexico. So they have all these innovative, clever ways. But at the end of the day, you'll hear stories lately where we have a $6 billion in Chinese businessmen buying real estate, property, farmland all over America. And 58% of those are cash transactions. Well, they're getting the cash from cartels. So we are helping, not only are the Chinese killing our kids through the Mexican cartels now, the chemicals that they're sending, now we're helping them develop counterintelligence operations all over our country, near our military bases. Now we have record levels of Chinese nationals coming in the border. We don't know what they're coming for. So this is the bigger picture on China positioning themselves with counterintelligence operations as Americans are dying at historic levels. So that's another thing that has to be really discussed a lot more in detail. Unfortunately, people are just not talking about it. They're not connecting the dots. But when you look at the investigations that are going on right now in the D.E.A, Homeland Security investigations, Chinese nationals are all over the country running around with this cash. And we know what they're doing because we have cooperators, we have intelligence, we have evidence. And this is getting worse too.
All right. Yeah. So, I had no idea that it was that connected.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Very connected.
Yeah.
And one other thing, only because I know Texas was bombarded for a while. So one thing that people also don't realize is in 2008, when the Chinese lab operators started producing what we call synthetic cathinones, synthetic cannabinoids, also known as synthetic marijuana, right? K2 spice bath salts. I'm sure you know what that stuff is, sold out of convenience stores, bodegas, gas stations across the country. Texas was getting inundated.
Yep.
They call it Kush sometimes, right?
Yep.
And
I got in a lot of fights with those guys.
Yeah. So these people in America are taking this stuff. It's poisonous chemicals from Chinese labs. that are coming into the country. They spray it on the leaf material. They put it in the packaging. And we had this massive problem for years in this country. Emergency room admissions going up, poison control centers. No one knew what it was. That's the same lab operators started making fentanyl a few years later.
Oh, no
Okay.
shit.
And now, you know what they're making now? They're making xylazine, which is the trank drug that's eating people from inside and out. It's called xylazine. It's a legitimate pharmaceutical drug used for sedation of horses, elephants. It's an animal tranquilizer that is now mixing with fentanyl all throughout America. And we're seeing people on the streets with skin ulcerations. They have open wounds on their arms, their legs. They got to get amputations. They're rotting. It's causing necrosis, the rotting of human tissue, coming out of the same Chinese labs. You could buy that on the internet as cheap as $1 a kilogram. Now, they're also now making more powerful synthetic opioids like fentanyl called edenidazine, isonitazine, nitazine. This is now 20 times, in some cases, more powerful than fentanyl. It is a synthetic opioid, but that's now coming out of the lab. So this is another phase of the Chinese attack on America to destabilize the country under the disguise of drug trafficking. And our country's not connecting those dots.
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
My friend, exactly. And by the way, I don't want to scare the shit out of you, but I have proof of this too.
Too late.
Ready for this? A lot of these bodega operators that were selling that K2 and spice were from Yemen in the Middle East. We tracked millions and millions of dollars going back to documented terrorists. Okay? And by the way, in the state of Texas, the DEA arrested a guy who was selling synthetic drugs out of a convenience store outside of Dallas in 2016. His father was the mastermind of the South African embassy bombing, or the East Africa, I can't remember, East Africa embassy bombing, where Osama bin Laden used this guy as his mastermind to do the bombing. The son of this guy was arrested for selling synthetics in his shop in Texas. I think it was Fort Worth, as a matter of fact, 2016. Okay? So yeah, there's another whole dynamic, which I'm not even going to get into right now, but
yeah,
I studied that stuff. I lived it when I was the head of the SOD operation. It's quite alarming.
Yeah. Yep. No, and I can vouch. I know another little operation that we know is connected directly to funding terrorism overseas is the buying, stealing, selling of, this sounds so stupid, but like wick stuff, like things that soaps and diapers and laundry detergents. It's such a weird thing, but that's these little shops. That's what they're doing.
No, criminal activities generating the proceeds to help bad guys do what they want to do at the high level. Yeah. It's not that weird. It's common sense.
Yeah. It's alarming to know that money is directly going overseas. So, but well, I appreciate you being on, bro. Like this is going to be one of my favorite episodes for sure.
Well, thank Matt. Matt connected us. I don't know how you know Matt, but
you talk about Matthew Booth?
Yeah.
Yeah. He actually is working with my agency currently, trying to get some stuff going.
I know. I know what he's doing.
Yeah. He's the one that donated the mic as well. So
I didn't know that. You didn't tell me that.
Yeah. Apparently, I had done a podcast with somebody, and we got to discussing microphones for some reason, and I don't truly even remember which episode this was because I got over 100 out there. But apparently, I had talked about how this was like my dream mic, which it is. But I'm a cop on a cop's budget doing a podcast, and my mics are about $89 a piece. This is like $400, and so I could never justify purchasing one. And he likes what the show's doing and wanted to support it some way, somehow. So he bought a mic for us. So
well, it looks professional. I just want to know where the other cop is. It says 2 cops, 1 donut. Where the hell's the other cop?
Okay. I am a city cop and I am a military cop.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was 2 cops like another cop. That's good.
No, so I am 2 cops. So that's kind of where the name's coming from. So
I like it. Very creative. Good
Yeah.
job. Well, I appreciate your time. I'll let you go, but thank you very much and look forward to hooking up again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna send you my testimony document so you have it in case you ever need it.
Okay, will do, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a good day, my man.